My daughter called me at 3 in the morning. Just 5 words. Dad, please come get me. Then the line went dead. When I arrived at her in-law's estate, her mother-in-law blocked the door and sneered she is not leaving. I did not argue. I did not beg. I got back into my truck and rammed their $20,000 iron gate until it twisted off its hinges. When I found my daughter unconscious on the bathroom floor with needle marks on her arms, my blood did not just boil. It turned to ice. And that was the moment I decided I was not just taking my daughter home. I was going to buy their entire legacy just to burn it to the ground. My name is Cornelius Jefferson. I am 68 years old. To my neighbors, I am just a retired contractor who drives a 10-year-old pickup truck and spends too much time tending to his lawn. They see an old black man who keeps his head down. They do not know about the shell companies. They do not know about the logistics empire I built from a single van. And they certainly do not know that I could buy their entire subdivision with the cash I keep in my floor safe. I keep it quiet because I wanted my daughter Zoe to find a man who loved her for her heart, not her father's wallet. I thought she had found that with Blake Worthington. I was wrong. The red numbers on my bedside clock read 3:03 a.m. when the phone rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It felt like an alarm. I fumbled for the receiver, my heart already hammering a warning rhythm against my ribs. Dad! Her voice was a ghost of the vibrant girl I raised. It was thick, slurred, and terrified. Dad, please come get me. They won't let me. Then there was a sound. The distinct, sickening thud of a phone being slapped out of a hand, a man's voice in the background, muffled but angry. Then silence. I did not say hello. I did not ask what was wrong. I was already out of bed, pulling my pants on over my pajamas. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage I had not felt since my days working construction sites in the 80s. I checked the GPS tracker I had installed on her phone years ago. It was a precaution she used to roll her eyes at calling me paranoid. Now that blue dot pulsing at the Worthington estate was the only thing keeping me sane. I grabbed my keys. I walked past the gun safe. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. No, not tonight. If I took a weapon, I would use it, and then I would be no good to Zoe from a prison cell. I needed my hands. My hands were enough. The drive to the Worthington estate usually takes 40 minutes. I made it in 20. My old Ford F-150 rattled as I pushed it over 80 miles per hour on the empty highway. The streetlights blurred into streaks of white. I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. I thought about the bruises I had seen on Zoe's arm last Thanksgiving. She had told me she bumped into a doorframe. I had chosen to believe her because I wanted to respect her marriage. I wanted to believe that the prestigious, wealthy Worthingtons were good people. That was my first mistake. I turned off the main road and onto the private drive that led to their neighborhood. It was a place where the driveways were longer than most streets in my part of town. Manicured hedges, security cameras, silence. It was a fortress built to keep people like me out. I pulled up to the main gate of the Worthington mansion. It was a massive structure of wrought iron and stone designed to intimidate. Lights flooded the driveway as I slammed on the brakes. I jumped out of the truck before the engine even stopped rumbling. Open the gate, I roared. My voice echoed in the stillness of the night. The intercom buzzed, but no one spoke. Then the front door of the mansion opened. Victoria Worthington stepped out onto the porch. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my truck. She held a glass of wine, looking down at me from the top of her stone steps with the same look she gives the help when they miss a spot of dust. Go home, Cornelius, she called out. Her voice was calm, dripping with condescension. You are making a scene. I need to see Zoe, I shouted, walking up to the bars of the gate. She called me. She is in trouble. Victoria took a slow sip of her wine. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Zoe is having another one of her episodes. She is hysterical. Blake is trying to calm her down. She is sleeping now. Open this gate, Victoria. This is your last warning. She walked slowly down the steps, stopping safely on the other side of the iron bars. She looked at my worn work boots, my flannel shirt, my graying hair. She did not see a threat. She saw a nuisance. You people always get so emotional, she said, swirling her wine. Listen to me carefully. Zoe is not going anywhere. She is sick. We are handling it. Now get off my property before I call the police and tell them a crazy man is trying to break in. I am sure they will be very interested to see a man of your description lurking around here at this hour. She turned her back on me. She dismissed me. She thought the iron gate was enough. She thought her last name was enough. I did not scream. I did not curse. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. I walked back to my truck. I climbed into the driver's seat. I put my seatbelt on. I shifted into reverse and backed up until my rear bumper was almost touching the hedges across the street. Victoria stopped halfway to the door. She turned around, frowning. "What are you doing?" I shifted into drive. I floored the gas pedal. The engine roared like a waking beast. The tires screeched against the asphalt, burning rubber, finding traction. I saw Victoria's eyes go wide. She dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the driveway, but the sound was swallowed by the impact. My truck hit the center of the iron gate at 50 miles per hour. Metal screamed, stone cracked. The lock snapped like a twig. The gates flew open one side, tearing completely off its hinges and clattering across the paved driveway. My airbag did not deploy, thank God, but my head whipped back. I didn't feel the pain. Adrenaline is a powerful anesthetic. I drove right up to the front steps, crushing the shattered glass of her wine cup under my tires. Steam hissed from my radiator. I kicked my door open and stepped out. Victoria was screaming now, backing away, her composure gone. "You animal, you are going to jail." I walked past her. She tried to grab my arm. I swatted her away like a fly. I kicked the front door open. It was unlocked. Inside the house smelled of lavender and old money. The foyer was marble. A man in a dark suit stepped out from the hallway. Private security. He was big, younger than me, with muscles that looked like they were built in a gym. "Sir, you need to stop right there," he commanded, reaching for his belt. I didn't stop. I kept walking. He stepped forward to intercept me, throwing a heavy right hook. I ducked. I spent 40 years hauling lumber and pouring concrete. I don't fight with technique, I fight with leverage. I drove my shoulder into his midsection, knocking the wind out of him. As he doubled over, I brought my knee up into his nose. There was a crunch. He went down and stayed down. "Zoe," I yelled. I ran up the grand staircase. I checked the first bedroom. Empty. The second. Empty. Then I heard a toilet flush in the master suite. I burst through the double doors. Blake was standing by the bed, buttoning his shirt. He looked up, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. "Where is she?" I growled. "Cornelius, wait," he stammered, putting his hands up. "She just passed out. She took too many pills. I was trying to help her." "Liar." I pushed past him into the bathroom. My heart stopped. Zoe was lying on the cold tile floor. She was curled into a ball, wearing one of Blake's t-shirts. Her skin was gray. Her breathing was shallow, jagged like a rattle in her chest. "Zoe, baby daddy's here." I dropped to my knees. I lifted her head. Her eyes were rolled back. I checked her arms. That was when I saw them. Fresh puncture marks. Bruises that looked like fingerprints where someone had held her down. My vision blurred with red. This was not an overdose. This was an injection. I scooped her up in my arms. She was so light, too light. She had lost so much weight since Christmas. I stood up, holding my daughter against my chest. I turned to face Blake. He had backed into the corner of the bedroom, terrified. "What did you give her?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly quiet. "Nothing. She's an addict, Cornelius." "You know how she is." I walked toward him. He flinched. But I didn't hit him. Not yet. I had precious cargo. "If she dies," I whispered, "there is no place on this earth you can hide from me." I carried her out of the room, down the stairs, past the groaning security guard, and out the front door. Victoria was standing by my truck on her phone. She looked at me, at Zoe's limp body in my arms, and she didn't show an ounce of concern. She showed annoyance. "The police are 2 minutes away." "Cornelius," she hissed. "You have destroyed my gate. You have assaulted my staff. You are never going to see the light of day again." I gently placed Zoe in the passenger seat of my truck and buckled her in. I checked her pulse one more time. It was weak, but it was there. I walked around to the driver's side. I stopped and looked at Victoria. "You think you are untouchable," I said. "You think because you live behind a gate and I drive a truck, you have the power." I opened my door. In the distance, I could hear the sirens wailing, getting louder, cutting through the silence of the wealthy night. Blue and red lights began to flash against the trees at the end of the driveway. I got in and started the engine. The radiator was smoking, the front bumper was smashed into the grill, but the truck started. "You have no idea what you just started," Victoria yelled over the sirens. I looked at her through the broken window. "No," I said. "You have no idea who you just stole from." I shifted into reverse, backing away from the wreckage of their perfect life, knowing that the police were not coming to save me. They were coming for me. And I was ready. Because for the first time in 30 years, Cornelius Jefferson was about to go to war. Before this night is over, I thought, as the first police cruiser screeched to a halt, blocking the driveway, blocking my exit. Everyone is going to know the truth. But first I had to survive the next 10 minutes. The officers poured out of their cars, guns drawn. They didn't see a father saving his daughter. They saw a black man in a battered truck at a wealthy white estate. "Get out of the vehicle, put your hands where I can see them." I looked at Zoe. She let out a soft moan. "Hold on, baby," I whispered. I turned off the engine. I put my hands out the window. But I did not take my eyes off Victoria Worthington, who was standing there with a triumphant smile on her face. She thought this was the end. She thought she had won. She was wrong. This was just the opening move, and I had resources she couldn't even imagine waiting for my call. As the officers grabbed me and threw me against the hot metal of my truck hood, I didn't feel fear. I felt focus. I knew exactly who to call. I knew exactly which lever to pull. The handcuffs clicked tight around my wrists. The metal was cold, biting into my skin. "You are under arrest for home invasion, assault, and destruction of property," an officer barked in my ear. I didn't resist. I let them shove me into the back of the cruiser. I watched through the wire mesh as paramedics finally approached my truck to look at Zoe. Victoria walked over to the police sergeant, pointing at me, talking fast, spinning her web of lies. I sat back against the hard plastic seat and closed my eyes. Okay, I thought, you want to play the game of power? You want to play the game of who do you know? I took a deep breath. Let's play. The back of the police cruiser smelled of stale vomit and hard plastic. My wrists burned against the metal cuffs, but I sat upright. I refused to slump. I refused to look like the criminal they had already decided I was. Through the wire mesh, I watched the paramedics load Zoe into the ambulance. She looked so small on the stretcher. A flash of red and blue light illuminated her pale face, and for a second I thought she was dead. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs until I saw her chest rise. She was breathing. That was all that mattered. The drive to the precinct was fast and silent. The officers in the front seat didn't speak to me. They didn't ask for my side of the story. To them, the narrative was written in stone the moment they arrived at the Worthington estate. A wealthy white family, a gated community, a black man in a work truck who had smashed through their property. It didn't matter that I had built half the schools in this county. It didn't matter that my tax returns had more zeros than their badge numbers. In that car, I was just a violent intruder. When we arrived at the station, they pulled me out with unnecessary force. One officer, a young man with a buzz cut, gripped my arm tight enough to bruise. "Watch your head," he said, shoving me down into the booking room chair. He wasn't being helpful. He was establishing dominance. I didn't resist. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a struggle. I gave them my name. I gave them my address. When they asked for my occupation, I said retired. The sergeant behind the desk scoffed. Retired from what? Breaking and entering, I looked him in the eye. He was a man who had likely spent his whole life feeling small, and now he had a badge and a gun and a chance to feel big. "Retired from building the precinct you are sitting in?" I said calmly. He stopped typing. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Then he sneered and went back to his computer, put him in holding. They took my belt. They took my shoelaces. They took my dignity piece by piece and locked it away in a plastic bag. Then they shoved me into a cell that smelled of urine and despair. The heavy steel door slammed shut with a sound that echoed in the hollow of my stomach. I sat on the cold concrete bench. The cell was empty, save for a drunk sleeping in the corner. I leaned my head against the cinder block wall and closed my eyes. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, aching clarity. My mind drifted back 3 years, to the day Zoe told me she was marrying Blake. We were sitting on my back porch drinking iced tea. She was glowing. "Dad. He is different," she had said. "He comes from a good family. They are important people." I had tried to warn her. I told her that important people often think they are above the rules. I told her that money doesn't make a man good, it just makes him loud. But she was in love. She saw a prince. I saw a man who never looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. A man who made small jokes about my truck, about my neighborhood jokes that were wrapped in a smile but cut like a razor. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner last year. Blake had snapped at Zoe for spilling gravy on the tablecloth. It was a small thing. A flash of anger that disappeared as quickly as it came. But I saw the way Zoe flinched. I saw the way she looked down, whispering an apology to a man who should have been laughing it off. I should have intervened then. I should have flipped the table and dragged him outside. But I didn't. I respected her choices. I respected her marriage. I was a fool. A father's job isn't to respect a marriage that is killing his child. A father's job is to protect her even from herself. I had failed her. I had let my little girl walk into a house of wolves because I didn't want to seem like the overprotective, angry father. I sat in that cell and let the guilt wash over me. It was heavier than the concrete walls. Hours passed. The drunk in the corner woke up, vomited, and went back to sleep. Morning light began to creep through the high barred window. I waited for the arraignment. I waited for the chance to post bail. I had the cash. I could buy my freedom 10 times over. But no one came. Around noon, the door buzzed open. A guard called my name. Jefferson, lawyer. They led me to a small consultation room. Samuel Diggs was waiting for me. Samuel has been my attorney for 20 years. He is the only person on earth besides me who knows the full extent of my assets. He stood when I entered, his face a mask of controlled professional rage. He didn't offer a handshake. He pointed to the chair. "Sit down, Cornelius." I sat. "Where is the bail bondsman?" I asked. "There is no bail." Samuel said, his voice tight. "The judge denied it." "Denied it. On what grounds? I have no prior record. I am a homeowner." "On the grounds that Conrad Worthington played golf with the judge last Sunday," Samuel said, opening his briefcase. "They are charging you with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. They are claiming the truck was the weapon. They say you tried to run Victoria over. Conrad is pushing for attempted murder." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Of course he is. He wants to bury me under a mountain of legal fees and prison time so I can't look for Zoe. "Where is she?" I asked. "She is in a private facility," Samuel said. "St. Jude's Behavioral Health. It is a high-security rehab center in the mountains. Conrad got an emergency medical guardianship order signed this morning. He claimed Zoe is a danger to herself and others due to drug psychosis. They have her on a 72-hour hold, Cornelius. No visitors, no phone calls." My hands clenched into fists on the metal table. They locked her away. They drugged her, beat her, and now they locked her away to hide the evidence. "This isn't a legal battle, Samuel," I said quietly. "This is a siege." "Conrad thinks he has won," Samuel said. "He thinks you are just a blue-collar guy with a temper. He doesn't know about the holdings. He doesn't know about the liquid capital. He is going to learn," I said. I leaned forward. "Samuel, do you have the red binder?" Samuel nodded. He knew what I was asking. The red binder contained the protocols for the Black Fund. It was a war chest I had started building the day Zoe was born. Money that didn't exist on public records. Money that could move mountains, or destroy them. "Activate it," I said. Samuel paused. "Cornelius, if we do this, we are declaring total war. We will be burning cash at a rate that would make a bank nervous. We are talking about hostile takeovers. We are talking about buying debt. I don't care, I cut him off. I want you to buy everything. Find out who holds the mortgage on the Worthington estate. Buy it. Find out who holds the notes on Blake's car, on Victoria's credit cards, on Conrad's country club membership. Buy it all." I looked Samuel in the eye. "They took my daughter. They took my freedom. I am going to take their world. I want to own the air they breathe. By the time I get out of this cell, I want to be their landlord, their banker, and their worst nightmare." Samuel closed his briefcase. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot. "I will make the calls," he said. He stood up and knocked on the door for the guard. Before he left, he looked back at me. "Conrad Worthington spent 40 years building a reputation," Samuel said. "It is going to take us about 40 minutes to buy it." I leaned back in my chair. For the first time since the phone rang at 3:00 a.m., I felt a sense of calm. It was the calm of a man who knows he has the biggest gun in the room and he just took the safety off. They wanted to use the system against me. They wanted to use their power to crush the little guy. They were about to find out that the little guy owned the bank that built their pedestal. "Get me out of here, Samuel," I said. "I have a daughter to save." The sun outside the precinct was blinding. It felt like an insult. I walked out of the heavy steel doors, my shoelaces back in my boots, my wallet back in my pocket, but I did not feel free. Samuel was waiting for me by his black sedan. He did not smile. He held out a piece of paper. It was a temporary restraining order. Conrad Worthington had been busy while I sat in a cell. The order was comprehensive. I was to stay 500 yards away from Zoe, Worthington, Blake Worthington, and their residence. I was forbidden from contacting them by phone, email, or third party. If I violated it, I would go straight back to jail and there would be no bail this time. I crumpled the paper in my fist. They were using the law as a shield to hide their crime. "Where is she, Samuel?" I asked. "St. Jude's," he replied. But Cornelius, you cannot go there. The order covers her location. If you step foot on that property, Conrad will have you arrested before you reach the front desk. I got into my truck. The front bumper was mangled, a metal scar from the night before. I drove. I did not go to St. Jude's. I knew Samuel was right. If I went there now, I would be playing their game, and they made the rules. I needed to change the game. I drove to a small, nondescript office building in the industrial district. This was where I kept my other insurance policy. His name was Dante. He was a private investigator who used to be a forensic accountant for the state. He didn't care about the law. He cared about the truth as long as the check cleared. I walked into his office. Dante was sitting behind a desk covered in files. He looked up, his eyes tired but sharp. "I heard you had a busy night, Cornelius," he said. I sat down. "Tell me you found something, Dante. Tell me why they are holding my daughter hostage." Dante slid a manila folder across the desk. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a medical intake form from St. Jude's Behavioral Health. The date was from this morning. Diagnosis: severe opioid use disorder, acute psychosis. My hands shook. I read further. The report claimed Zoe had been using heroin for 2 years. It claimed she had a history of self-harm. It claimed she was delusional and violent. "It is a lie," I said, my voice low. "Zoe is afraid of needles. She faints when she gets a flu shot. She drinks 1 glass of wine at Christmas. She is not a junkie." "Look at the signature," Dante said. I looked. Dr. Eris Thorne. I didn't recognize the name. "Thorne is on the Worthington payroll," Dante explained. "He is a concierge doctor for the wealthy. He signs what they pay him to sign. But look at the toxicology screening attached to the back. This is the real one. I have a source in the lab." I flipped the page. The official report said heroin. The real lab results, the ones Dante had intercepted, told a different story. There were no opioids in her system. None. But there were massive levels of haloperidol and lorazepam. I looked up at Dante. "They are tranquilizers," he said. "Antipsychotics and sedatives. They are not treating an addiction, Cornelius. They are chemically lobotomizing her. They are keeping her sedated so she cannot speak. They are keeping her in a twilight state so she cannot tell anyone what happened last night." I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavier than the anger from the night before. This was not heat. This was ice. They were erasing my daughter. They were turning her into a vegetable to cover their tracks. Why, I asked. Why go to this length? Why not just divorce her? Why destroy her? Dante reached for a second folder. This one was thicker. "Because of this," he said. He opened the file. It was a financial autopsy of Blake Worthington. On the surface, Blake was a successful investment banker. He wore $5,000 suits. He drove a Porsche. He lived in a mansion. But the papers in front of me showed the rot beneath the gilding. "Blake is broke," Dante said bluntly. "He is not just broke. He is underwater. He has been leveraging his assets for 5 years to cover bad trades. He lost $2 million on crypto. He lost another $3 million on a failed tech startup. I flipped through the bank statements, red ink everywhere, overdraft fees. But that is not the worst part." Dante continued. "He drained the trust fund." I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. "When my wife died, she left a trust for Zoe. It was substantial, enough to ensure Zoe would never have to work if she didn't want to. It was supposed to be untouchable. It is gone, Cornelius. All of it. Blake forged her signature on withdrawal requests for the last 18 months. He emptied it to pay margin calls. I felt sick. My wife's legacy, the security I had built for my daughter, stolen by a man who smiled at me across the dinner table. But even that wasn't enough, Dante said. He pointed to a document at the bottom of the stack. It was a loan agreement, but not from a bank. It was a promissory note from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. He borrowed $5 million from the cartel, Dante said, or at least people who lend money with the same terms as the cartel. High interest, short repayment window, and severe penalties for default. I looked at the date. The loan was due in 2 weeks. "He doesn't have the money," I said. "No," Dante agreed. "He has nothing. His parents, Conrad and Victoria, they are asset rich, but cash poor. Their money is tied up in trusts and properties they cannot liquidate quickly without raising red flags. So why keep Zoe?" I asked. "If she has no money left, why keep her?" Dante pulled out a map. It was a survey map of the downtown district. He circled a large plot of land near the waterfront. Because of this, Dante said, "The old lumber yard." I nodded. I knew it well. I had bought that land 30 years ago when it was worthless industrial waste. I had cleaned it up. I had put the deed in Zoe's name as a wedding present. I told her to keep it. I told her it was her safety net. Developers just got approval for a new stadium 3 blocks away, Dante said. That land is now worth $10 million. Blake knows it. He has a buyer lined up. A cash buyer. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. He needs her to sell it, I realized. He needs her signature, Dante corrected, but Zoe refused. I found emails on Blake's server. He has been pressuring her to sell for months. She told him no. She told him it was her father's gift. So he needs her incapacitated, I said, finishing the thought. Exactly. If Zoe is declared mentally incompetent, if she is committed to a long-term facility for severe drug addiction and psychosis, control of her assets transfers to her spouse. Blake gets power of attorney, he signs the deed, he sells the land, he pays the mob, and he keeps the change. It was a slave contract. They weren't just silencing her, they were enslaving her. They were stripping her of her mind, her voice, and her property to pay for his sins. They were going to lock her away in a drugged haze for the rest of her life, or until she conveniently overdosed just so Blake could keep playing the rich man. I looked at the photos of my daughter in the medical file. She looked pale, lost, broken. They think she is just a resource, I said. They think she is a piggy bank they can break open. They don't know who they are dealing with, Dante said. They think you are just a dad with a truck. I closed the folder. I picked up the toxicology report. I am not just a dad, I said. I am the man who is going to repossess their lives. I took out my checkbook. I wrote Dante a check for $50,000. Keep digging, I said. I want names. I want to know who holds Blake's gambling debts. I want to know who the mobsters are. I want to know where Conrad hides his money. I want to know everything. I walked out of the office. The sun was setting. The sky was bleeding red. It was fitting. I sat in my truck and called Samuel. Samuel, I said, I know what they are doing. It is the land, the lumber yard. I will put a lis pendens on the property immediately, Samuel said. I will tie it up in litigation so tight a mosquito couldn't fly through it. They won't be able to sell an inch of it. Do it, I said. And Samuel. Yes, Cornelius. Find out who owns the debt on the Worthington mansion. I already did, Samuel replied. It is a private equity firm in Boston. Buy it, I said. Cornelius, that will cost, I don't care what it costs. Buy the note. I want to be the one who holds the deed to their house. I want to be the one who decides if they have a roof over their heads tonight. Consider it done. I hung up. I looked at the restraining order on the passenger seat. It said I couldn't go near them. It said I couldn't touch them. But it didn't say I couldn't own them. They wanted to trap my daughter in a cage of lies and drugs. I was going to build a cage of debt and legal ruin around them, and I was going to weld the door shut. I started the engine. I wasn't going home. I had work to do. I drove toward the city, toward the lights, toward the war. The Worthingtons wanted to treat people like property. Fine. I was about to teach them what happens when the property fights back. I was about to show them that you cannot build a dynasty on the back of a Jefferson. Tonight I would not sleep. Tonight I would become the monster they accuse me of being. But I would be a monster with a checkbook, and that is the most dangerous kind of all. I drove to St. Sebastian's Academy with a singular purpose. My daughter was locked in a medicated fog, and my son-in-law was drowning in debt so deep he was willing to sell her soul to pay for it. That left my grandson. Leo was 5 years old. He was an innocent pawn on a chessboard he did not understand. I knew the Worthingtons. I knew their playbook. If they could not break Zoe, they would use Leo as leverage. They would hold him hostage until she signed whatever papers they put in front of her. I needed to get him out. I needed to get him to safety before they poisoned his mind against his mother. The school was a fortress of brick and ivy nestled in the same zip code as the Worthington estate. It was the kind of place that cost $40,000 a year for kindergarten. I pulled my battered truck up to the curb, ignoring the glares of the soccer moms in their Range Rovers. I walked to the front office. The air conditioning was freezing. The receptionist, a woman with reading glasses on a pearl chain, looked up at me. She did not smile. I am here to pick up Leo Worthington, I said. I am his grandfather, Cornelius Jefferson. She stiffened. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. One moment, Mr. Jefferson. She picked up the phone and whispered something. She did not look at me. She looked at the door behind her. A moment later, the door opened. A man in a tweed suit stepped out. It was Principal Harrington. I knew him. Or rather, I knew of him. He played golf with Conrad Worthington every Sunday. He was part of the club, Mr. Jefferson Harrington said. His voice was smooth, practiced, and utterly cold. You need to leave the premises immediately. I am on the authorized pickup list, I said, keeping my voice level. Zoe put me on it 3 years ago. Harrington sighed as if he were dealing with a slow child. That list has been updated as of this morning. Furthermore, we are in possession of a temporary protective order granted by Judge Miller. It states that you are not to have any contact with Leo Worthington. He held up a piece of paper. It was faxed. The ink was still fresh. Conrad had moved fast. He had called in his favors. He had used his old connections from his days on the bench to seal off my family before I could even reach them. This is illegal, I said. You are keeping a child from his family. His mother is in the hospital. His father has given us strict instructions, Harrington interrupted. And as you know, Mr. Worthington is a pillar of this community. We take our students' safety very seriously here. We cannot have violent individuals on campus. Violent. The word hung in the air. He looked at my work boots. He looked at my dark skin. He looked at the history of a man he didn't know and stamped a label on it. You are making a mistake, Harrington, I said. The only mistake would be letting you near that boy, he replied. Security is on their way. I suggest you go back to wherever you came from. I looked at the glass doors leading to the classrooms. I could see the children lining up for dismissal. I saw the back of Leo's head. He was wearing his little blue blazer. He looked so small. I wanted to smash through the glass. I wanted to tear the door off its hinges and grab my grandson. But I knew that was exactly what they wanted. They wanted the angry black man to cause a scene. They wanted footage for the evening news. I turned around and walked out. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man who is memorizing the layout of the battlefield. I waited by my truck. I could not leave. Not yet. I had to see him. I had to make sure he was physically okay. The restraining order said 500 yards. I stood at the edge of the public sidewalk exactly 500 yards from the school entrance. I checked the distance on my phone. I would not give them a technicality to arrest me on. 10 minutes later, a silver Porsche pulled up to the loading zone. It was Blake. He stepped out wearing a suit that cost more than my first house. He looked tired, his eyes manic and darting, but when he saw me standing on the corner, a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He walked to the gate where a teacher was holding Leo's hand. He signed the clipboard. He took Leo's hand, but he did not walk back to the car. He walked toward me. He stopped 10 feet away just inside the property line. Leo looked up at me. His eyes were wide and confused. Grandpa Leo chirped. "Hush," Leo Blake said, tightening his grip on the boy's hand. "Grandpa is not allowed to talk to us. Grandpa is a bad man." The words hit me like physical blows. He was poisoning the well. He was twisting the love my grandson had for me into fear. Blake looked at me. His eyes were dead. There was no soul behind them, just a desperate, clawing greed. "You look pathetic," Cornelius Blake said. "Standing there in your dirty clothes. Do you really think a judge is going to give custody to you? You live in a shack. You smell like sawdust and sweat. Leo needs a legacy. He needs a future. He does not need to learn how to mix concrete." I stared at him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The urge to cross that line, to close the distance and shatter his jaw was a physical ache in my bones. I could do it. I could end him in seconds. I had spent 40 years lifting steel beams. He had spent 40 years lifting martini glasses. But I saw the phone in his other hand. The camera lens was peeking out of his pocket. He was recording. He was baiting me. He wanted me to strike him in front of his son. He wanted to prove to the court that I was the monster they claimed I was. I took a deep breath. I let the rage flow through me, and then I pushed it down into the cold, dark place where I kept my business decisions. "You are right, Blake," I said. My voice was calm. It terrified him. I saw his smile flicker. "You are absolutely right. I am just a worker." "Go home," Cornelius Blake sneered. "Go back to your side of town. Leo is a Worthington. He belongs with his own kind." He turned and dragged Leo toward the Porsche. Leo looked back over his shoulder. He waved a tiny, hesitant hand. I raised my hand and waved back. I forced a smile for the boy. "I love you, Leo," I whispered. Blake shoved the boy into the car and slammed the door. He peeled away from the curb, the engine roaring, leaving me standing in the exhaust fumes. I stood there for a long time. The sun beat down on my neck. The humiliation burned on my skin. They thought they had won. They thought that because they held the keys to the gate, they held the power. They thought money was the only language that mattered. Fine. If they wanted to speak the language of money, I would become fluent. I got into my truck. I did not turn the key. I pulled out my secure phone. This was not the phone I used to call Zoe. This was the phone I used to call the people who managed the wealth I had hidden from the world. I dialed a number that went directly to a private office in Manhattan. It was the personal line of Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling & Finch Private Bank. I wasn't just a client. I was the majority shareholder. I had bailed the bank out during the 2008 crash with liquid capital when everyone else was insolvent. They answered to me. Cornelius Arthur answered on the first ring. "It is rare to hear from you during trading hours. Is everything all right?" "No, Arthur," I said. "I want you to open the ledger on the Worthington Group." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Conrad Worthington?" Arthur asked. "Cornelius, that portfolio is toxic. We have been advising against acquiring their debt for years. They are over-leveraged. Their real estate holdings are underwater. They are surviving on lines of credit and reputation. I know I said, I want you to buy it. Buy what Arthur asked. All of it, I said. Every commercial loan, every personal line of credit. I want you to buy the mortgage on their estate in Hillcrest. I want you to buy the note on Blake Worthington's car. I want you to buy the debt on Conrad's vacation home in the Hamptons. If they owe a dime to anyone in this country, I want to be the one collecting it." Cornelius Arthur said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We are talking about tens of millions of dollars in bad debt. You will be taking a massive loss. This is not a sound investment." "It is not an investment, Arthur," I said. "It is an eviction notice." I looked at the spot where Blake's car had been. "I want a hostile takeover of their entire existence," I said. "I want to own the roof over their heads. I want to own the cars they drive. I want to own the shirts on their backs. Call in the notes, Arthur. All of them, immediately. But, sir, the default clauses, trigger them," I commanded. "They have missed payments. I know they have. Use the acceleration clause. Demand full repayment within 24 hours. Arthur was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice professional, cold, efficient. "It will be done. We will acquire the debt packages by close of business today. The demand letters will be couriered to the Worthington estate tomorrow morning." "Good," I said. "And, Arthur." "Yes, Cornelius, freeze their access to any new credit. Flag them as high risk. I want them to walk into a grocery store and have their cards declined. I want them to feel what it is like to have nothing." "Understood." I hung up the phone. My hands were no longer shaking. The rage was gone, replaced by the cold, mechanical hum of a plan in motion. Blake had told me to go back to my side of town. He didn't realize that my side of town owned his side of town. He didn't realize that the dirt under my fingernails was worth more than his entire bloodline. I started the truck. The engine rumbled a deep, angry sound. "Enjoy your night in the mansion." "Blake," I said to the empty air, "it is the last one you will ever have." I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to prepare. Tomorrow the repo men were coming, and I was going to be leading the parade. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. It smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. The Worthingtons were hosting their annual charity gala, an event they titled the Foundation for Family Recovery. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy. Ostensibly, they were raising money for addiction treatment centers. In reality, they were laundering their reputation. They needed to show the world they were still the golden family of the city, even as the walls of debt were closing in around them. I stood in the shadows of the velvet curtains near the entrance. I was not wearing my work boots tonight. I was wearing a bespoke tuxedo cut from Italian wool, a garment that cost more than Blake's first car. I adjusted the onyx cufflinks at my wrists. They felt cold and heavy. I watched Victoria Worthington take the stage. The spotlight hit her, illuminating the diamonds at her throat and the tear glistening perfectly on her cheek. She was a phenomenal actress. My family has known pain, she told the hushed crowd, her voice trembling just enough to seem authentic. We have seen how drugs can destroy the brightest souls. We are fighting to save our loved ones even when they do not want to be saved. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the room. They were talking about Zoe. They were using my daughter, the woman they had drugged and imprisoned, as a prop to solicit donations from the city's elite. They were painting her as a tragic addict and themselves as the saintly in-laws bearing the burden. It was sickening. Conrad stood by her side, nodding solemnly. Blake was in the front row looking like a grieving husband. They were selling a lie to cover their bankruptcy. They needed these donations not for charity, but to pay the interest on their loans. They needed the social capital to keep the creditors at bay for just one more month. I checked my watch. My banker Arthur had confirmed the transfer of funds. The trap was set. I walked out of the shadows. I did not sneak in. I walked down the center aisle with the stride of a man who owns the building. Heads turned. Whispers started. Who is that? Is that the contractor? What is he doing here? I saw Conrad's eyes lock onto me. His face went gray. He took a step forward as if to signal security, but he stopped. He couldn't make a scene. Not here, not in front of the mayor and the senators. He had to play the game. I took a seat at the empty table reserved for platinum donors. It was right in the front. I picked up the auction paddle. It was number 001. I had bought the table anonymously that morning for $50,000. Victoria faltered in her speech. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. I poured myself a glass of water and raised it to her in a silent toast. Continue, Victoria. Tell us more about your charity. She swallowed hard and rushed to the end of her speech. The applause was polite but confused. The tension in the room was palpable. They knew I didn't belong, but the tuxedo and the table said I did. They were paralyzed by social protocol. Then came the main event, the auction. They brought out the items, a vacation in Tuscany, a vintage wine collection. I sat still. I wasn't interested in toys. I was waiting for the centerpiece. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer announced, his voice booming. Tonight we have a very special sacrifice. Mrs. Victoria Worthington has generously donated a family heirloom to support the cause, the Worthington Sapphire. A model walked onto the stage wearing a necklace that glittered under the lights, a massive blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. I knew that necklace. Zoe had told me about it. It was the only real asset they had left that wasn't leveraged. Victoria wasn't donating it for charity. She was liquidating it in public to get cash fast, disguising the sale as philanthropy so she could funnel the money back into her own pockets through administrative fees. It was clever, it was illegal, and it was about to be mine. The bidding will start at $50,000, the auctioneer said. 50,000, a voice called from the back. 75, said another. It was a slow climb. The economy was tough, and even the rich were feeling the pinch. Or maybe they just sensed the desperation in the room. 100,000, Blake shouted. He was shill bidding. He was trying to drive the price up, trying to save his inheritance. It was a dangerous game. If he won, they would have to pay the commission to the house and they would still have the necklace, but no money. 110, a real estate mogul countered. I lifted my paddle. 200,000. The room went silent. The auctioneer blinked. He looked at me, then at Conrad. Conrad looked like he was having a stroke. He couldn't stop me. Money was money. 200,000 to the gentleman in the front. The auctioneer stammered. Do I hear 220? Blake looked at me with pure hatred. He raised his hand. 250. He was bluffing. He didn't have $250,000. He was praying someone else would jump in. 300,000, I said, my voice calm, boring into Blake's eyes. Blake froze. He couldn't go higher. If the hammer fell on him, the fraud would be exposed when his check bounced. He lowered his hand. Going once, the auctioneer said. 350, Conrad shouted from the side of the stage. He was desperate. He couldn't let me have it. I didn't even look at him. 400,000. Conrad's face turned purple. He opened his mouth, but Victoria grabbed his arm. She whispered something in his ear. Probably that they needed the money more than the pride. Probably that $400,000 could pay off the most dangerous loan sharks. Going twice, the auctioneer said, scanning the room for a savior who wasn't there. Sold. To Mr. Jefferson for $400,000. The gavel banged. It sounded like a judgment. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The applause was scattered, hesitant. The elite of the city watched with morbid curiosity as the black contractor walked toward the white matriarch. The auctioneer handed me the microphone. He looked nervous. He handed me the velvet box containing the necklace. I took the box. I looked at the sapphire. It was cold and heavy. "Thank you," I said. My voice was amplified, filling the ballroom. "It is an honor to contribute to such a creative cause." I looked at Victoria. She was standing stiffly, a forced smile plastered on her face, waiting for me to leave. She expected me to take my prize and disappear. But I wasn't done. I turned to the audience. "You know, I said my family has always taught me that true value isn't found in stones. It is found in character. It is found in how you treat people when you think no one is watching." I scanned the room. I was looking for someone specific. Earlier in the evening, when I was in the shadows, I had seen a server drop a tray of champagne flutes near the kitchen doors. Victoria had screamed at her. She had called her clumsy, stupid, and worthless. She had fired her on the spot and told her to clean up the mess before she left. I saw the young woman now. She was on her hands and knees in the back corner, picking up shards of glass, tears streaming down her face. She was a young Latina woman, probably no older than Zoe. "Excuse me," I said, pointing to the back of the room. "You, the young lady on the floor. Please come here." The room turned. The girl looked up, terrified. She froze. "Yes, you," I said gently. "Please come up to the stage." She hesitated. Her manager nudged her. She stood up, brushing glass dust from her black uniform apron. She walked down the aisle, head down, terrified she was in trouble. When she reached the stage, she was trembling. "What is your name?" I asked. "Maria, sir," she whispered. "Maria," I said loud enough for the back row to hear. "Earlier tonight, I saw Mrs. Worthington speak to you. I heard what she said. She told you that you were worthless. She told you that you were nothing." Victoria gasped. "How dare you?" she hissed, stepping forward. I ignored her. I looked at Maria. "She was wrong, Maria. The work you do to support your family is worth more than every person sitting at these tables. You have dignity. You have grace." I opened the velvet box. I took out the sapphire necklace. "I bought this necklace for $400,000, I said. "It was the pride of the Worthington family. They believe it makes them royalty." I turned to Maria. "I want you to have it." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Someone dropped a glass. Sir Maria stammered. "I cannot." "Yes, you can," I said. I fastened the heavy clasp around her neck. The diamonds sparkled against her simple black uniform. "It is yours," I said. "Sell it, pay for school, buy a house, start a business. Do whatever you want with it, but never let anyone tell you that you are worth less than them." I turned to Victoria. Her face was a mask of absolute horror. She was watching her family legacy, her financial lifeline, hanging around the neck of the girl she had fired. "You wanted to sell your heritage to save your skin, Victoria," I said off the microphone, but loud enough for her to hear. "Now you can watch it walk out the door." I looked at Maria. "Go," I said. "Run. Do not look back." Maria looked at me, tears welling in her eyes again, but this time they were different. "Thank you," she mouthed. Then she turned and ran down the stairs, clutching the necklace, running toward the exit, running toward a new life. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. I walked past Conrad. He was clutching his chest. I walked past Blake. He was staring at the floor, defeated. I walked down the aisle through the silent crowd. No one stopped me. No one said a word. They parted like the Red Sea. I walked out into the cool night air. I had just spent $400,000 to make a point. It was a lot of money. But seeing the look on Victoria Worthington's face when she realized she had been bested by the help that was priceless. And I still had the receipt. The gala was over. But the night was young. I got into my truck. Now I said to myself, let's go get my daughter. The gala was a victory, but it was a hollow one. I had humiliated Victoria Worthington, but I still did not have my daughter. The adrenaline from the auction faded as soon as I got back into my truck, leaving a cold, hard knot of fear in my stomach. Dante had sent the coordinates to my secure phone. St. Jude's Behavioral Health was not a hospital. It was a fortress of solitude buried deep in the Cascade foothills, miles away from cell towers and prying eyes. I drove through the night. The road turned from pavement to gravel, winding up into the dense pine forest. The facility appeared out of the darkness like a specter. It was a sprawling, brutalist structure of concrete and glass surrounded by a 12-foot fence topped with razor wire. They called it a retreat for the troubled wealthy. I looked at the perimeter lighting and the guard towers and I knew exactly what it was. It was a prison for inconveniences. It was where the elite stashed the wives who knew too much and the children who embarrassed them. I parked my truck a mile down the road in a logging turnout. I sat in the dark and watched the facility through my binoculars. I saw armed patrols. I saw electronic keypads. If I tried to ram this gate, I would be shot before I reached the front door. Conrad Worthington had learned his lesson. He had moved Zoe to a place designed to keep people like me out. But I'm a builder. I look at a building and I do not see a fortress. I see blueprints. I see permits. I see codes. And I knew for a fact that a facility this remote built this quickly had cut corners. You cannot build a structure like that in this county without variances. You cannot operate a medical facility without rigorous inspections. And I knew that money often made inspectors look the other way. I picked up my phone. I did not call my lawyer. I called Sheriff Miller. We had played high school football together 50 years ago. He was a good man, a man who hated the Worthingtons almost as much as I did because Conrad had once dismissed a drunk driving charge against Blake that had put Miller's nephew in a wheelchair. Miller, I said when he answered, I know where she is, and I know how we are going to get her out, but I need you to bring someone. I need you to bring Vance. Vance was the state building inspector. He was a man with zero sense of humor and an obsessive adherence to the fire code. He was the most boring man I knew, and right now he was my deadliest weapon. I met them at the trailhead at dawn. Miller was in his uniform, his face set in grim lines. Vance was holding a clipboard, looking annoyed at being awake so early. This place has been operating under a provisional license for 3 years, I told Vance, pointing at the facility. They claimed agricultural zoning to bypass the commercial fire codes. They have 20 patients locked in rooms with magnetic locks, and I would bet my life the sprinkler system is not hooked up to the main water line because the main line does not run this far up the mountain. Vance's eyes lit up. To him, a code violation was a personal insult. If that is true, Vance said, I have the authority to shut them down immediately. Immediate evacuation order. Let us go find out, I said. We drove up to the main gate in the sheriff's cruiser. The guard stepped out his hand on his holster. He saw the badge on the door and hesitated. Open the gate, Miller commanded over the loudspeaker. Official business. The guard tried to stall. I need to call the director. You open this gate or I arrest you for obstruction of justice, Miller barked. The gate opened. We drove up to the main entrance. The director met us at the door. He was a slimy man in a white coat named Dr. Thorne, the same man who had signed the fake intake forms. Sheriff, he said with a greasy smile. To what do we owe the pleasure? We have strict privacy protocols. I stepped out from behind Miller. Thorne's smile vanished. This is not a social call, I said. This is a safety inspection. Mr. Vance stepped forward. He did not smile. He did not shake hands. He walked past Thorne and pointed to the ceiling. Where are the smoke detectors? Vance asked. Why are these exit signs not illuminated? Show me your generator logs. Show me your water pressure certification. Thorne stammered. We are fully compliant. We have a waiver. There are no waivers for human safety, Vance said. He pulled a fire alarm lever on the wall. Nothing happened. No sirens, no lights. Vance turned to Thorne. This facility is a death trap, he declared. I am revoking your occupancy permit effective immediately. You have 1 hour to evacuate all patients to a licensed hospital. Thorne went pale. You cannot do that. Mr. Worthington will... Mr. Worthington is not the fire marshal, Miller interrupted. You heard the man. Evacuate now. I did not wait for the argument to finish. While Thorne was distracted by the bureaucracy of his own negligence, I slipped past the reception desk. I grabbed a key card from the counter. I knew the layout. Dante had found the schematics. The high security wing was in the basement. I ran down the stairs. The air got colder. The smell of antiseptic was overpowering. It covered up the smell of urine and fear. I walked down the hallway, checking the small windows and the heavy steel doors. Room 101, empty. Room 102, an old man rocking back and forth. Room 103, I looked inside. Zoe was there. She was strapped to a bed in the center of the room. Her wrists were bound with leather cuffs. There was an IV drip connected to her arm. Her eyes were open, but they were glassy, staring at the ceiling without seeing it. She looked like a broken doll. I swiped the keycard. The light turned red. Access denied. I didn't care. I stepped back and kicked the lock mechanism. It sparked but held. I kicked it again, putting every ounce of my rage into the blow. The plastic casing shattered. I jammed my pocket knife into the exposed wires and twisted. The door clicked and slid open. Zoe, I whispered, rushing to her side. She did not react. She did not blink. I ripped the IV out of her arm. I didn't care about being gentle. I cared about getting the poison out of her veins. I fumbled with the straps on her wrists. They were tight, digging into her skin. Her arms were purple and bruised. "What did they do to you?" I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. I got one strap loose, then the other. I pulled her up into a sitting position. She slumped against me, her head lolling on my shoulder. She was drooling slightly. "Dad," she mumbled. Her voice was thick, like her tongue was too big for her mouth. "Dad, is that you?" "I am here, baby," I said, lifting her into my arms. "I am here." "You have to leave," she slurred. "They will hurt you. Nobody is going to hurt us ever again," I promised. I carried her out into the hallway. 2 orderlies appeared at the end of the corridor. They were big men used to manhandling sedated patients. "Hey," one of them shouted. "Put her down!" I kept walking toward them. I was carrying my daughter, but I felt light. I felt unstoppable. "Get out of my way," I warned. They hesitated. They saw the look in my eyes. They saw a father who had already destroyed a gate and bought a bank. They decided they did not get paid enough to die today. They stepped aside. I carried Zoe up the stairs and into the lobby. Vance was writing citations. Miller was handcuffing Thorne. "I have her," I announced. Miller looked at Zoe's condition and his jaw tightened. "Get her to the car," Cornelius Miller said. "I will handle this trash." I walked out into the sunlight. I put Zoe in the passenger seat of my truck, which I had retrieved after the raid. I buckled her in. I wrapped my jacket around her shivering shoulders. As we drove away from that house of horrors, Zoe started to cry. It was a low, keening sound of pure anguish. "They made me sign," she wept. "They held my hand and made me sign the papers. They took the land, Dad." "We will get it back," I said, gripping the wheel. "No," she whispered. "It is worse. Dad, you have to listen." "I am listening, baby." "Blake," she said, her voice suddenly clear, terrified. "Blake was driving the car." "What car?" "The night of the accident," she said. "The girl who died on Route 9. It was not a hit and run, Dad. Blake hit her. He was drunk. He called his father. Conrad came. They moved the body." I slammed on the brakes, pulling onto the shoulder of the gravel road. Dust swirled around us. "Say that again," I commanded. "They moved her to the driver's seat of her own car." Zoe sobbed. "They made it look like she swerved into a tree. But Blake hit her." "I was in the passenger seat, Dad. I saw it. They told me if I ever told anyone, they would kill me. That is why they locked me up. I threatened to go to the police." The silence in the truck was heavy. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a sledgehammer. This was not just about money. It was not just about land. This was about a murder cover-up. They had imprisoned my daughter, drugged her, and driven her insane, not just to steal her inheritance, but to keep her from sending Blake to prison for vehicular manslaughter. I looked at my daughter. She was terrified, broken, and traumatized. But she was alive, and she had just given me the nuclear launch code. "We are not going home," I said, starting the truck again. "Where are we going?" she asked. "We are going to verify a story," I said. "And then we are going to bury them." I drove toward the city. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting thieves anymore. I was hunting killers, and I knew exactly where to start digging. The gravel road crunched beneath the tires of my truck as I pulled back onto the main highway. Zoe was shivering beside me, huddled in my oversized work jacket, her face illuminated by the dashboard lights. The revelation she had just dropped was heavy enough to sink a ship. A dead girl. A cover-up. A hit and run. I needed details. I needed to know exactly what we were up against. "Zoe," I said, keeping my voice soft but firm. "I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Do not leave anything out." She took a ragged breath. "It was the night of the gala last year," she whispered. "The one for the hospital. Blake had been drinking since noon. He was angry because Conrad had threatened to cut off his allowance if he did not close a deal with some investors. We left early. He insisted on driving. He said he was fine. He was driving the Porsche. We were on Route 9, the dark stretch near the reservoir. I knew the road. It was narrow, winding, and unlit. A dangerous place for a sober driver, let alone a drunk one. He was driving too fast, she continued, tears streaming down her face again. He was yelling at me, blaming me for his failures. He took his eyes off the road to look at me. I screamed. There was a girl walking her bike on the shoulder. He hit her dad. He did not swerve. He did not brake. He hit her at 60 miles per hour. I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles turned white. And then, he didn't stop, she said. He kept driving for a mile. Then he panicked. He pulled over into a logging road. He called Conrad. He did not call 911. He called his father. Conrad arrived 20 minutes later with the family lawyer and 2 men I did not know. They took my phone. They told me to sit in Conrad's car and not to look. But you looked, I said. I looked, she confirmed. They drove back to the scene. They found the girl. She was gone. They put her in the driver's seat of her own car, which was parked nearby. They staged it. They made it look like she had lost control and hit a tree. Then they took the Porsche to a private garage to be crushed. And they wanted you to take the fall, I asked, the bile rising in my throat. Months later, Zoe said, the investigation was not going away. There was a witness who saw a sports car. Conrad told me that if it came down to it, I had to say I was driving. He said Blake had a future. He said Blake was a Worthington, and I was just nobody. He said a jury would go easy on me. When I refused, when I told them I was going to the district attorney, that was when they staged the intervention. That was when they locked me up. They did not just want to steal her money, they wanted to steal her life to pay for Blake's sins. They were willing to lobotomize the mother of their grandchild to save their son from prison. It was a level of evil that I had not prepared for. I had prepared for greed. I had not prepared for this. We are not going to the police, I said. Not yet. Conrad owns the local precinct. If we walk in there now, we will never walk out. I drove to the city to a hotel that I owned through a holding company. It was not fancy, but it was secure. I took Zoe up the service elevator to the penthouse suite. I called a private doctor. I trusted a man who owed me his practice to come and examine her. I called Dante and told him to find the police report for the accident on Route 9. I wanted the name of the girl. I wanted to know who she was. Stay here, I told Zoe. Do not answer the door. Do not use the phone. I will be back. Where are you going? She asked, terrified. I am going home, I said. I need to draw their fire. I drove back to my house in the suburbs. It was a modest 2-story colonial on a quiet street. I had lived there for 30 years. It was the only home Zoe had ever known before she married into the Worthington nightmare. When I turned onto my street, I saw the circus. News vans were parked on my lawn. Satellite dishes were pointed at my front door. Reporters were swarming the sidewalk like vultures. And in the middle of it all, standing on a makeshift podium, was Conrad Worthington. He was wearing a suit that looked perfect for a funeral. He looked devastated. He was speaking into a cluster of microphones, his voice thick with fake emotion. We are pleading with Mr. Jefferson, Conrad said, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. Please, Cornelius, we know you are angry. We know you have a history of violence, but Zoe needs medical attention. She is sick. She is a danger to herself. Please just bring her home. We will not press charges. We just want our daughter back. He was good. He was painting a masterpiece of lies. He was turning the narrative upside down. I wasn't the rescuer. I was the unhinged, violent father who had kidnapped his addict daughter from a treatment center. He was using every stereotype in the book. The angry black man, the benevolent white patriarch, the tragic daughter caught in the middle. I parked my truck down the block. I walked toward the crowd. A reporter saw me. There he is. Someone shouted. The cameras turned. The lights blinded me. Microphones were shoved in my face. Mr. Jefferson, is it true you assaulted the staff at St. Jude's? Mr. Jefferson, do you have a history of domestic violence? Mr. Jefferson, is your daughter on heroin? They didn't give me a chance to speak. They shouted questions that were really accusations. Conrad looked at me across the sea of cameras. He didn't look scared, he looked smug. He gave me a look that said, you cannot win this. I own the narrative. I pushed through the crowd. I didn't say a word. I didn't hit anyone, though. God knows I wanted to. I walked up my driveway, unlocked my front door, and stepped inside. I slammed the door on the noise. My house was quiet. It smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I walked to the living room window and peered through the blinds. Conrad was wrapping up his speech. He looked like a statesman. The reporters were eating it up. They were broadcasting his lies live to the entire state. My phone rang. It was Samuel. Cornelius, turn on the TV, Samuel said. Channel 4. I turned it on. The headline screamed across the bottom of the screen. Grandfather kidnaps, daughter assaults hospital staff. Manhunt underway. They issued a warrant, Samuel said. Assault with intent to commit a felony. Kidnapping. The judge signed it 10 minutes ago. They are coming for you, Cornelius. You need to leave. No, I said. If I run, I look guilty. If I run, they win. They are going to arrest you, Samuel warned. And this time, they won't be gentle. Conrad has pulled strings at the state level. These won't be local cops. These will be state troopers. Or worse. Let them come, I said. I hung up. I went to the kitchen and brewed a pot of tea. I sat in my favorite armchair in the living room. I waited. 20 minutes later, the siren started. Not one or two, a dozen. They screamed down the street, drowning out the reporters. I heard tires screeching. I heard car doors slamming. Then came the bullhorn. Cornelius Jefferson. This is the state police. Come out with your hands up. I took a sip of tea. I did not move. Seconds later, my front door exploded inward. They didn't even try the handle. A battering ram turned my oak door into splinters. Men in tactical gear swarmed into my living room. They had assault rifles. They had shields. They looked like they were invading a foreign country, not arresting a 68-year-old grandfather. Get on the ground. Do it now. I set my teacup down on the coaster. I slowly lowered myself to the carpet. I put my hands behind my head. They were on me instantly. A boot slammed into my back, driving the air from my lungs. A knee pressed my face into the rug. They zip-tied my wrists so tight my fingers went numb. Clear, shouted one. No sign of the girl, shouted another. They hauled me up and threw me onto the sofa. A man in a suit walked in. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a trench coat and a sneer. I recognized him. Detective Vance. He was known in the neighborhood. He was known for solving cases by finding evidence that wasn't there before. He was Conrad's fixer with a badge. Where is she? Cornelius Vance asked, leaning into my face. I stared at him. I said nothing. Have it your way, Vance said. Boys tear this place apart. Look for drugs. Look for weapons. Look for anything that tells us where he took her. They destroyed my home. They ripped the cushions off the sofa. They pulled the books off the shelves. They smashed my wife's vase collection. It wasn't a search. It was a punishment. Vance stood by the fireplace watching. He caught the eye of a uniformed officer near the kitchen. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. The officer, a young guy with nervous eyes, reached into his pocket. He pulled out a clear plastic bag filled with white powder. He walked over to my recliner, the one I had just been sitting in. He knelt down. He pretended to look under the cushion. When he pulled his hand back, the bag was in it. Sarge, the officer shouted. I found something. Vance walked over. He picked up the bag with a gloved hand. He held it up to the light. Well, well, Vance said, looking at me with a mock expression of disappointment. Heroin. A lot of it. Looks like we found the source of your daughter's addiction, Cornelius. Looks like you are not just a kidnapper. You are a dealer. My heart should have been racing. I should have been screaming that it was a plant. I should have been begging them to believe me. But I sat there calm as a frozen lake. I watched Vance bag the evidence. I watched them high-five each other with their eyes. They thought they had nailed me. They thought they had the silver bullet that would put me away for 20 years and give Conrad full custody of Zoe and the land. Vance walked over to me. He leaned down close to my ear. You messed with the wrong family, old man, he whispered. You are going to die in prison. I looked him in the eye. I didn't blink. Maybe I said. Or maybe you should have checked the ceiling. Vance frowned. What? I nodded upward. In the corner of the room, hidden inside the smoke detector, a tiny red light blinked. It was one of 12 4K cameras I had installed 5 years ago after a break-in down the street. It recorded everything. It recorded the raid. It recorded the destruction. And it recorded in perfect high definition the officer pulling the bag of heroin out of his own pocket and shoving it under my cushion. And it wasn't just recording to a hard drive, it was uploading to a cloud server in real time. A server that Samuel had access to. A server that was currently broadcasting a private feed to my legal team. Vance looked up. He saw the lens. The color drained from his face faster than water from a cracked tub. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. Smile, detective, I said. You are going to be a star. Vance lunged for the camera, tearing the smoke detector off the ceiling and smashing it on the floor. He stomped on it until it was plastic shards. Too late, I said. It is already in the cloud. Vance looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He knew his career was over. He knew he was going to prison. But he also knew he had a gun and I was handcuffed. Get him out of here, Vance screamed, his voice cracking. Get him to the station! Now! They dragged me out of the house. The cameras outside flashed. The reporters shouted. Conrad was still there, shaking his head sadly as I was led away in chains. He looked at me with pity. He thought the drugs had been found. He thought the plan had worked. I looked at him as they shoved me into the back of the car. I didn't shout. I just nodded. Go ahead, Conrad, I thought. Enjoy your moment. Because tomorrow morning I am going to release that video. And tomorrow morning the whole world is going to see exactly what kind of people you really are. The car pulled away. I sat back in the seat. I was going to jail again, but this time I wasn't just an inmate. I was a man with a detonator, and the fuse was already burning. Samuel Diggs walked into the interrogation room 3 hours after I was arrested. He did not carry a briefcase. He carried a tablet. He placed it on the metal table between me and the smug precinct captain who had been trying to get me to sign a confession. Samuel didn't say a word. He just pressed play. The video on the screen was crisp. It was crystal clear 4K resolution. It showed my living room. It showed the officers tearing apart my sofa. And then in slow motion it showed Detective Vance reaching into his own pocket, pulling out a bag of white powder and tucking it under the cushion. The timestamp was undeniable. The angle was irrefutable. The captain's face drained of color. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a stone. "You have 5 minutes to process my client's release," Samuel said, his voice like grinding gears. "Or I will send this to every news station in the state. And Captain, I will also be filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against you personally before lunch." I was out in 10 minutes. They gave me back my belt. They gave me back my shoelaces. They didn't look me in the eye. Vance was nowhere to be seen. He was probably already clearing out his desk or calling a lawyer. I didn't go to the hospital. I went home. I needed to set the stage. I walked into my house. It was a disaster zone. Furniture overturned. Books ripped apart. The drywall punched in. It looked like a tornado had touched down in my living room. I didn't clean it up. I left it exactly as it was. I went to the kitchen. My kettle was one of the few things they hadn't smashed. I filled it with water. I put it on the stove. I waited for the whistle. I made a cup of Earl Grey tea. Then I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Vance had planted the drugs in. I took a sip. It was hot. It was grounding. I took out my phone. I logged into my social media account. I had never used it much, mostly just to keep up with industry news. Today I was going to use it to burn down a reputation. I uploaded the video. I didn't add music. I didn't add a filter. I just titled it "The Truth About the Worthington Raid." I hit post. Then I waited. It took 12 minutes. That is how fast the world moves now. The first 1,000 views came from the neighborhood. Then it jumped to 10,000, then 50,000. The comments rolled in like a tidal wave. They weren't talking about the angry black kidnapper anymore. They were talking about the dirty cop. They were talking about the plant. They were talking about corruption. Justice for Cornelius started trending statewide. I took another sip of tea. I watched the numbers climb. 100,000 views, 500,000. Outside, the noise began to change. The reporters were still there, camped on my lawn like vultures. But the tone of their chatter had shifted. They weren't shouting accusations anymore. They were shouting questions at the police cruisers that were trying to leave the scene. I stood up. I buttoned my flannel shirt. I brushed the dust off my jeans. It was time for the second act. I opened my front door. The flashes went off instantly. It was a wall of white light. I stepped out onto my porch. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't look down. I looked straight at the camera lens of the biggest news van. "Mr. Jefferson, is the video real? Did the police plant the drugs? Where is your daughter?" I held up a hand. The crowd quieted. They wanted a soundbite. They wanted rage. I gave them ice. "My name is Cornelius Jefferson," I said. My voice carried over the lawn without a microphone. "Earlier today I was arrested for kidnapping my own daughter. I was accused of being a drug dealer. You have all seen the video. You know that was a lie. But you do not know the biggest lie." I reached down and picked up a stack of documents Samuel had prepared for me. They were heavy, thick bond paper. "You have been told that the Worthingtons are the victims here," I continued. "You have been told that I am a brute attacking a noble family. But you have not been told who paid for that nobility." I held up the first document. It was a foreclosure notice from 3 years ago, quietly settled out of court. "The Worthington family is bankrupt," I stated. A gasp went through the press pool. The reporters started typing furiously on their phones. "They have zero liquid assets," I said. "Their businesses are shells. Their investments are gone." For the last 2 years, they have been living on loans they cannot pay and donations from the charity foundation they claim to run. I tossed the document into the crowd. A reporter scrambled to catch it. I held up the next document. It was a bank statement from the foundation. "This is the ledger for the Foundation for Family Recovery," I said. "You all donated to it last night. You thought you were helping addicts. You weren't. Look at the withdrawals, private jet charters, jewelry stores, payments on a Porsche, payments on a mortgage." I threw that document too. It fluttered in the wind like a dying bird. "They stole from the sick to pay for their suits," I said. "And when the money ran out, they tried to steal from me. They tried to steal my daughter. They tried to lock her away and drug her until she signed over the only thing she had left. A piece of land worth $10 million. I looked directly into the camera. "Conrad Worthington is not a philanthropist. He is a parasite, and he is broke." I turned and walked back into my house. I slammed the door. I didn't answer any more questions. I had given them enough blood for one day. I went back to my armchair. I finished my tea. The silence inside the house was heavy, but outside, the world was screaming. An hour later, the counterattack began. I expected it. Conrad Worthington was a cornered rat and rats bite. I turned on the television. Victoria Worthington was live on Channel 5. She was sitting in her parlor wearing a modest beige sweater, looking small and fragile. She held a handkerchief to her eyes. She was a master of optics. "He is a violent man," Victoria sobbed. She looked into the camera with wide, fearful eyes. "We tried to help him. We tried to help his daughter, but he has a hatred for us. He has a hatred for people like us." She paused, letting the implications sink in. She was playing the race card, but she was flipping the deck. She was painting me as the aggressor, the angry black man coming to destroy the civilized white family. "He destroyed our gate," she continued, her voice trembling. "He beat our security guard. And now he is spreading lies. These documents he shows you, they are forgeries. He is a criminal. He has connections to the underworld. We are terrified. We are prisoners in our own home." She wiped a tear. "We just want our grandson back," she whispered. "We just want to be safe." It was a good performance. It would have worked yesterday. But today the internet had seen a cop plant heroin in my sofa. Today the internet was looking at the bank statements I had released. I picked up my secure phone. I called Arthur at the bank. "Did you see the interview?" I asked. "I did," Arthur replied. "She is very convincing." "Is the paperwork ready?" I asked. "It is," Arthur said. "We own the debt. We own the mortgage. We own the lines of credit." "Send it," I said. "Send what, Cornelius?" "The demand letter." "No," I said. "Send the foreclosure notice. Accelerate the debt. They are in default. They have missed 3 payments on the house in the last 6 months. The previous bank let it slide because of who they are." "I am not the previous bank," Cornelius, Arthur warned. "If we do this, we have to give them notice." "Give them 24 hours, I said. "Tell them they have 24 hours to pay the full balance of the mortgage, $4.5 million. Or we seize the property." "They don't have $4 million, Arthur said. "I know," I replied. "That is the point." I hung up. I walked to the window. The sun was setting. The reporters were still there, editing their footage, preparing for the evening news cycle. Victoria Worthington wanted to talk about being a prisoner in her own home. Tomorrow she wouldn't have a home to be a prisoner in. I sat back down. I felt a deep exhaustion settling into my bones. I missed Zoe. I missed Leo. I wanted to be a grandfather who took his grandson fishing. Instead, I was a general in a war I never wanted. But I would finish it. I would strip them of every layer of protection they had. I would take their money. I would take their reputation. I would take their house. And when they were standing naked in the street, shivering in the cold reality of their own making, then maybe they would understand what it felt like to be powerless. My phone pinged. It was a text from Dante. "Blake is on the move," it read. I stared at the screen. Blake wasn't at the house. He wasn't with his parents. He was out there somewhere desperate and dangerous. "Where is he going?" I typed back. "Unknown," Dante replied. He turned off his location services, but he bought a gun an hour ago. I put the phone down. The game had shifted again. We had moved past money. We had moved past reputation. We were entering the final phase, violence. I checked my own security system. The cameras were recording. The doors were reinforced. But a lock only keeps out an honest man, and Blake Worthington was no longer honest. He was a cornered animal. I stood up and walked to the gun safe in the hallway closet. I dialed the combination. The heavy door swung open. I reached inside and took out my old service revolver. It was heavy, cold steel. I hadn't held it in years. I checked the cylinder. It was loaded. I put the gun on the table next to my teacup. "Come on, Blake," I whispered to the empty room. "Come and get it." The foreclosure notice hit the Worthington mansion like a mortar shell, destroying the facade of their invincibility. But rats do not just die when their nest is destroyed, they bite. Blake Worthington was a man who had never been told no in his entire life, and now he had lost his money, his reputation, and his home. He snapped. My private investigator, Dante, called me at 2 a.m, his voice tight with urgency. The tracker on Blake's phone had gone dark, but not before pinging near the safe house where Victoria and Conrad were hiding. Blake did not go there for comfort, he went there for leverage. I drove to the safe house, my tires tearing up the asphalt. The front door was wide open, a gaping maw in the night. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Victoria was on the floor, clutching a cloth to a bleeding cut on her forehead, her perfectly coiffed hair in disarray. Conrad was shouting into a dead phone, his face purple with rage and fear. "He took him," Victoria sobbed, rocking back and forth. "He took Leo. He said he needed insurance." My heart stopped. He took his own son, a 5-year-old boy used as a bargaining chip by a father who had lost his mind. He was high, Victoria choked out. I could smell the chemical sweat on him. He was crashing Cornelius. He was shaking. He had a gun. He took the silver sedan, the one the bank had not seized yet because it was leased under a shell company. I did not offer Victoria comfort. I did not offer Conrad help. I turned on my heel and walked out. My grandson was in the hands of a desperate addict with a gun, and every second I wasted listening to their whining was a second Leo was in danger. My phone rang at 3:15. The number was blocked. I answered it immediately, my hand gripping the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "Cornelius." Blake's voice was jagged, broken glass, wrapped in panic. "I know you can hear me. Where is he, Blake?" I asked, my voice the eye of the hurricane, calm and deadly. "He is right here," Blake said. "He is sleeping. For now." Then came the sound that haunts me still. A high-pitched, manic laugh that sounded wet and ugly. "I want $10 million, Cornelius. Cash. Unmarked bills. And I want a helicopter at the private airfield in 2 hours. Or Leo wakes up in a world of hurt." "You are digging a hole you cannot climb out of," I said, trying to keep him talking, trying to get a fix on his location. "I am already in the hole," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You put me here. You destroyed my life. You took my house. You took my money. Now you are going to pay for my exit ticket." I heard a small whimper in the background. "Daddy, I want to go home." "Shut up," Blake yelled away from the phone. "Do not hurt him, Blake," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "If you touch one hair on his head, there is no place on earth you can hide from me. 10 million. 2 hours. Or I start sending pieces." The line went dead. Conrad had followed me out to the driveway. He looked old suddenly, his arrogance stripped away by the reality of his son's madness. "Call the police," Conrad demanded, his hands shaking. "Call the FBI. We need a negotiator." "No," I said. "You own the police chief. You have dinner with the FBI director. If I call them, they will turn this into a siege. They will bring snipers. They will surround him. Blake is paranoid and high. If he sees a flashing light, he will kill Leo. He will not hesitate." "Then what are we going to do?" Conrad asked, his voice trembling with the first genuine fear I had ever seen in him. "We cannot just let him run." "I am going to handle it," I said. "My way." I walked away from the broken patriarch. I got into my truck. I did not turn on the ignition immediately. I sat in the dark, breathing in the scent of old leather and dust. I needed a plan that did not involve sirens. I needed an army that did not wear badges. I picked up my secure phone again. I did not call a banker. I did not call a lawyer. I called Big Mike. Big Mike was the head of the Tri-State Transport Union. He was a man I had worked with on the docks 40 years ago, a man whose pension fund I had personally saved when corporate vultures tried to raid it in the 90s. He owed me nothing, but he would give me everything. Cornelius Mike's voice rumbled like a diesel engine. "It is late. I need eyes, Mike," I said. "I need every set of eyes you have on the road. What are we looking for?" "Silver sedan, late model, license plate Bravo Lima 69er, driven by a desperate man, carrying a 5-year-old boy." Mike did not ask why. He did not ask for police reports. He knew that if I was calling at this hour, it was life or death. "Consider it done, brother." Within 10 minutes, the call went out. It was not on the police band. It was on the CB radios. It was on the encrypted dispatch channels of every trucking company, every construction crew, every sanitation fleet in the state. I had built this city, not just the buildings, but the networks. I had hired the men who poured the concrete. I had paid for the weddings of the women who drove the buses. I had stood on the picket lines when the strikes turned violent. They did not know me as the wealthy recluse Cornelius Jefferson. They knew me as the man who never bounced a check, the man who kept his word, the man who was one of them. The city woke up. Headlights flickered on in truck stops along the interstate. Delivery vans changed their routes to sweep secondary roads. Garbage trucks slowed down to scan alleyways and dead ends. Construction workers on the night shift climbed their cranes to scan the horizon. 20,000 pairs of eyes were looking for my grandson. Blake thought he was running through an empty night. He thought the roads were just asphalt and concrete. He did not realize he was running through a living web. A web built of loyalty and sweat and blood, and I was the spider in the center pulling the strings. I drove toward the city center, keeping my phone on the dashboard. I watched the reports roll in on the secure app Mike used for union business. Nothing on Route 9. Clear on the interstate. Nothing downtown. Then at 4 in the morning, the radio crackled. I got him, a voice said. It was deep and gravelly. Concrete Mixer 42. He just passed me on the service road near the old industrial park. He is driving erratic. He is heading for the abandoned warehouses by the river. The industrial park, my old stomping grounds. I knew every inch of that place. I had poured the foundations for half those warehouses back in the 80s. It was a maze of rusted steel and broken concrete. A perfect place for a rat to hide. Do not engage, I ordered. Just keep eyes on him. Block the exits if you can, but do not let him see you. 10-4 Mixer 42 out. I started the engine. My truck roared to life. I am coming, Leo, I whispered. I hung up the radio. I wasn't a grandfather anymore. I wasn't a businessman. I was a force of nature. And I was bringing the storm. I drove fast, but controlled. I knew the layout of the industrial park. There was only one way in and one way out unless you knew the service tunnels. Blake would corner himself. He would go to the biggest building, the old steel mill, thinking he could hold out there. As I drove, I thought about the man Blake had become. He was a product of a system that taught him he could buy his way out of anything. He thought money was power. He thought influence was power. He did not understand that real power comes from the people who build your world, the people who drive your roads, the people who fix your pipes. He had spent his life looking down on them. Now they were the ones hunting him. I turned off my headlights as I approached the industrial sector. I saw the silhouette of the concrete mixer blocking the north road. The driver flashed his lights once. I nodded. I pulled into the shadows of a dilapidated warehouse. I checked my revolver one last time. 6 rounds. No safety. I got out of the truck. The air smelled of rust and river water. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it, a child crying. It was faint, echoing off the metal walls of the old mill. Leo. I moved toward the sound. I moved like a ghost. I had spent years walking on active construction sites, learning to move without disturbing the dust. I reached the main doors of the mill. They were chained shut, but the side entrance was ajar. I slipped inside. The cavernous space was lit by a single work light Blake must have brought with him. He was pacing back and forth on the catwalk 20 feet above the concrete floor. He was shouting into his phone, probably trying to call his father again. Leo was sitting on the floor of the catwalk, his knees pulled to his chest. He was shaking. I stepped into the light. Blake, I said, my voice echoing through the vast empty space. He spun around, raising the gun. He looked wild. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his hair matted with sweat. "Stay back!" he screamed. "I will shoot him, Cornelius. I swear to God I will do it." I stopped. I raised my hands slowly. "It is over, Blake," I said calmly. "The police are not coming. Your father is not coming. It is just us." "Where is my money?" he demanded, his gun wavering between me and Leo. "Where is my helicopter?" "There is no money," I said. "There never was." "You are broke, Blake. You have been broke for years." "Liar," he shrieked. "My father has millions." "Your father is leveraged to the hilt," I said, taking a slow step forward. "I own his debt. I own his house. I own this building we are standing in. There is nothing left, Blake. It is all gone." He staggered back as if I had hit him. The reality of his failure was finally piercing the drug-induced haze. "No," he whispered. "No. I am a Worthington. You are a criminal," I said. "You killed a girl. You drugged your wife. You kidnapped your son. That is your legacy now." He looked at Leo. Then he looked at me. His face crumpled. "Then I have nothing to lose," he said, raising the gun to his own head. "No," I shouted, taking another step. But he didn't pull the trigger. He laughed. A low, sobbing laugh. "You want him," he said, pointing the gun back at Leo. "Come and get him." He grabbed Leo by the collar of his shirt and dragged him to the edge of the catwalk. The railing was rusted and broken. It was a 20-foot drop to the concrete. I froze. "Let him go, Blake." "You come up here," he said. "You come up here and trade places. You want to be the hero. Be the hero." I looked at the rusted stairs. I looked at my grandson's terrified face. "Okay," I said. "I am coming up." I walked to the stairs. My knees ached. My heart hammered. But I climbed. I climbed toward the man who had destroyed my family, and I prayed that I had one good fight left in me, because only one of us was walking out of this mill alive, and it wasn't going to be him. The metal stairs groaned under my weight as I ascended toward the catwalk. Every step was a battle against gravity and 68 years of wear and tear on my knees, but I did not stop. I kept my eyes locked on Blake Worthington. He stood 20 feet above the concrete floor, swaying slightly, his expensive suit ruined by sweat and grime. He held my grandson by the back of his shirt, dangling him over the edge like a rag doll. Leo was not crying anymore. He had gone silent with terror, his small hands gripping Blake's wrist, his eyes wide and fixed on me. I reached the top of the landing. The catwalk was narrow, rusted, and illuminated by the harsh yellow glow of the worklight Blake had hung from a beam. We were suspended in the darkness of the abandoned mill, a steel cage where the only law was gravity. Blake pointed the gun at me, then at Leo, then back at me. His hand was shaking so violently the barrel blurred. "Stop right there, Cornelius," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Do not take another step or I drop him. I swear I will drop him." I stopped. I was 10 feet away. Close enough to see the dilated pupils in Blake's eyes. Close enough to smell the acrid stench of fear and withdrawals radiating off him. He was crashing hard. The drugs were leaving his system and reality was rushing in to fill the void. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and desperate pleading. He wanted me to save him and he wanted to kill me. "Let the boy go." "Blake," I said, keeping my hands open and visible. "This is between you and me. Leo has nothing to do with this." "He has everything to do with this," Blake spat. "He is my insurance. He is the only reason you are not shooting me right now. I do not have a gun." "Blake," I lied. My revolver was tucked into the back of my waistband, cold against my spine, but I could not draw it. Not with Leo that close to the edge. If I missed, if I startled him, Leo would fall. I had to talk him down. I had to break him without touching him. "You think you are so smart," Cornelius Blake laughed, a high, thin sound. "You think you beat us. You think you took everything. But my father will fix this. He always fixes it. He is calling the governor right now. He is getting the money. The helicopter will be here any minute." I looked at him with pity, genuine pity. He was a man-child waiting for a daddy who was never coming to save him. "Blake," I said, my voice low and steady. "Your father is not calling the governor." "Shut up," Blake yelled. "You do not know him. He is Conrad Worthington. He runs this state. Your father is at Teterboro Airport." "Blake," I said. "He filed a flight plan 30 minutes ago. Private charter to the Cayman Islands. One way." Blake froze. The gun lowered an inch. "Liar," he whispered. "He is not alone." I continued pressing the advantage. "Your mother is with him. They cleaned out the wall safe, Blake. They took the emergency cash. They took the diamonds. They left the house 20 minutes after you took Leo." "No," Blake said, shaking his head. "No, they wouldn't. We are a family. They are survivors, Blake," I said. And they looked at the board and realized you were the liability. They realized the murder charge was going to stick. They realized the fraud investigation was going to touch them. So they cut you loose. You are the sacrifice, Blake. You are the reason they are going to get away. I took a step forward. The metal grating clanged softly. "They left you here to take the fall," I said. "They are probably halfway to the Atlantic by now, drinking champagne and planning their press release about how their troubled son went rogue." Blake's face crumpled. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving only a terrified boy. "That is not true," he whimpered. "Call them. Call my mother." "I cannot call them, Blake," I said. "They turned their phones off. Try it." Blake looked at his phone lying on the floor of the catwalk where he had dropped it. He looked at me. He looked at Leo. The gun wavered. He was losing his grip on the situation. He needed to know. He needed to prove me wrong. "Pick it up," I said. "Call her. Ask her where she is." Blake slowly crouched down, dragging Leo with him. He never let go of the boy's shirt. He picked up the phone with his gun hand, fumbling with the screen. He put it to his ear. I watched his face. I saw the moment the call went to voicemail. I saw him redial. I saw the desperation mount. "Pick up," he muttered. "Mom, pick up. It is me. Please pick up." Nothing. Just the silence of the warehouse and the mechanical voice on the other end. I took another step. 8 feet. "She is not going to answer, Blake," I said softly. "She is gone. You are all alone." Blake dropped the phone. It clattered through the grate and fell 20 feet to the concrete below, shattering into pieces. He stared at the empty space where it had been. His world had just ended. The illusion of the Worthington dynasty, the safety net he had relied on for 35 years, had snapped. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "They left me," he whispered. "They actually left me." "They did," I said. "But I am here, and I am not leaving. Give me the boy, Blake. It is over." He looked at Leo. For a second I thought he was going to do it. I thought he was going to hand him over and surrender. I saw his muscles relax. I saw the gun point toward the floor. But then the madness snapped back. It wasn't the drugs this time. It was the despair. It was the realization that he was going to prison for the rest of his life, and that the people he worshipped had betrayed him. His face twisted into a mask of pure nihilistic rage. "If I am going down," he hissed, raising the gun again, "I am taking everything you love with me." He didn't point the gun at me. He pointed it at Leo's head. "No!" I shouted. Blake's finger tightened on the trigger. His eyes were wide, vacant, and deadly. He was going to do it. He was going to kill his own son just to hurt me. I did not think. I did not calculate. I just moved. I lunged forward, covering the 6 feet between us in a heartbeat. I didn't reach for the gun. I reached for Leo. I threw my body between the weapon and my grandson, wrapping my arms around the boy and twisting my back to the threat. The gunshot was deafening. It sounded like a cannon going off in a closet. The muzzle flash blinded me. I felt a sledgehammer hit my left shoulder, spinning me around. The impact stole the breath from my lungs. I fell hard against the railing, clutching Leo to my chest. Grandpa Leo screamed. I hit the metal grate. My shoulder was on fire. A burning, tearing pain radiated down my arm and up my neck. I looked down. My shirt was already soaked in dark red blood, but Leo was safe. He was crying, but he was whole. I looked up. Blake was standing over us, the gun smoking in his hand. He looked shocked, as if he hadn't expected the gun to actually fire. He stared at me, then at the gun, then at me again. He raised the weapon for a second shot. I reached for my revolver, but my left arm wouldn't move. It was dead weight. I fumbled for my waist with my right hand, but I knew I was too slow. Blake was going to finish it. "Goodbye, Cornelius," he whispered. Then the warehouse doors exploded. It wasn't the police. It was Samuel's private security team. They didn't shout warnings. They didn't ask for surrender. They operated with military precision. 3 men in tactical black gear burst through the side entrance. They moved like shadows. "Drop it," one of them commanded, his voice amplified and terrifying. Blake spun around, distracted. That was all the time they needed. A single shot rang out from the ground floor. It wasn't a lethal round. It was a beanbag round fired from a tactical shotgun. It hit Blake squarely in the chest. He folded like a lawn chair, dropping the gun and gasping for air. He fell backward, hitting the metal grate with a hollow thud. Before he could recover, the security team was on him. They swarmed up the stairs, boots clanging on the metal. 2 of them pinned Blake to the ground, zip-tying his hands and feet before he could draw a breath. The 3rd man, a giant with a medic's patch on his vest, knelt beside me. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, pressing a gauze pad to my shoulder. "Stay with me." I looked at Leo. He was clinging to my good arm, burying his face in my chest. "Is he okay?" I rasped, the taste of copper in my mouth. "He is fine, sir," the medic said, checking Leo quickly. "Not a scratch. You took the hit." I looked over at Blake. He was screaming now, thrashing against the restraints, cursing his parents. cursing me, cursing the world. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The medic applied pressure to my wound. The pain was blinding, white-hot and sharp, but beneath it I felt a profound sense of peace. "It is over," I whispered to Leo, stroking his hair with my trembling hand. "It is all over." Samuel walked into the warehouse a moment later. He was wearing a trench coat over his pajamas. He looked at the scene, the blood, the subdued gunman, the terrified child. He walked up the stairs and stood over me. "The ambulance is 2 minutes out, Cornelius," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Did you get them?" I asked, gritting my teeth against the pain. "We got them," Samuel confirmed. "Airport security detained Conrad and Victoria at the gate. Their passports were flagged. Your bank froze their assets mid-transaction. They are in custody." I closed my eyes. The fire in my shoulder was spreading, but so was the victory. "Good," I said. Blake was still screaming as they dragged him down the stairs. "I am a Worthington. You cannot do this to me." I opened my eyes and looked at him one last time. "You are nothing. Blake," I said, my voice weak but carrying through the silence. "You are just a man who owes a debt, and I am here to collect." The medic loaded me onto a stretcher. Leo refused to let go of my hand, so they let him ride with me. As they carried me out into the cool morning air, I looked up at the sky. The sun was rising, painting the clouds in shades of gold and purple. I was bleeding. I was broken. I was exhausted. But I had my grandson, and the Worthington Empire was nothing but ash in the wind. "We won, Leo," I whispered as the darkness at the edge of my vision began to close in. "We won." While the paramedics were cutting the blood-soaked shirt off my back in the back of the ambulance, my lawyer Samuel was receiving a play-by-play of the scene unfolding at JFK International Airport. It was a scene I had orchestrated with the precision of a demolition expert. Conrad and Victoria Worthington were trying to flee the country. They had booked 2 first-class tickets to the Cayman Islands on a commercial flight because their private charter had been grounded by a lien I placed on the aircraft an hour earlier. They were standing at the check-in counter, surrounded by Louis Vuitton luggage, trying to look like a power couple going on a holiday rather than 2 fugitives running from the wreckage of their lives. According to the report, Conrad handed the ticket agent his platinum credit card with the air of a man who owns the airline. He was sweating, though. His eyes were darting around the terminal, looking for police, looking for creditors, looking for me. The agent swiped the card. She frowned. She swiped it again. I can imagine the look on Conrad's face when she looked up and said, "I am sorry, sir, but this card has been declined." Conrad must have laughed that nervous, high-pitched laugh of his. "Try it again," he would have demanded. "There is a mistake. I have $1 million limit on that card." But there was no mistake. My bank had frozen every asset linked to his Social Security number. He produced another card. Declined. And another. Declined. Victoria began to hiss at him, her voice rising in panic, telling him to fix it, telling him not to embarrass her. People were starting to stare. The line behind them was growing restless. Finally, in a fit of desperation, Conrad pulled out a stack of cash from his briefcase. "Here," he shouted, throwing the bills on the counter. $5,000. Just give us the boarding passes." That was the mistake. Large cash transactions at an international terminal trigger protocols. The agent signaled security. Then came the passports. Conrad had paid a forger $10,000 for 2 expedited passports under false names. They were high-quality fakes, the kind that might fool a hotel clerk, but they do not fool the Department of Homeland Security database. The agent scanned them. A silent alarm tripped in the TSA office. Within seconds, 4 federal agents materialized from the crowd. They did not ask politely. They did not care about Conrad's golf handicap or Victoria's charity galas. They grabbed Conrad by the arms and slammed him against the ticket counter. Victoria screamed, claiming she was being assaulted, claiming she knew the governor, claiming they were making a terrible mistake. The entire terminal watched as the great Worthington matriarch was handcuffed, face pressed against the cold linoleum floor, her skirt hiked up, her dignity stripped away. They were dragged out screaming, leaving their expensive luggage spinning on the carousel. They didn't make the flight. They made the news. 12 hours later, I walked into the county detention center. My left arm was in a sling strapped tight against my chest. The bullet wound throbbed with a dull, heavy ache that radiated up my neck. but the pain kept me sharp. It reminded me why I was there. I had refused the strong painkillers. I wanted to be clear-headed. I wanted to remember every detail of this conversation. Samuel tried to stop me. He told me to go home and rest. He told me the lawyers would handle it. But this was personal. I needed to see her. I needed to look her in the eye one last time. The guard led me to the visitation room. It was a small concrete box divided by a thick pane of plexiglass. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and sweat. I sat down on the metal stool, my bones protesting the hard surface. A moment later, the door on the other side opened. Victoria walked in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was flat and greasy. Her makeup was gone, revealing the lines of age and bitterness etched into her face. But her eyes were the same. They were cold, hard, and filled with a venomous arrogance that even a jail cell could not extinguish. She sat down. She looked at my sling. She looked at my face. She did not look ashamed. She looked furious. "You look terrible, Cornelius," she said, her voice tinny through the speaker. "I hope it hurts." "It hurts less than losing a child," I replied, my voice steady. "You should know. You threw yours to the wolves to save yourself." She scoffed. She leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. "You think you have won, don't you? You think because you have some money and some dirty connections you can destroy us? You are a fool. This is a misunderstanding. Conrad is making calls right now. We have friends in Washington. We have friends in the State House. By tomorrow morning we will be out on bail, and you will be facing a lawsuit for malicious prosecution that will bankrupt you." She truly believed it. She lived in a bubble of privilege so thick she could not see the walls closing in. She thought the rules simply did not apply to people with her last name. "There is no bail, Victoria," I said. The judge denied it. "Flight risk. You were caught with fake passports and $10,000 in cash. You aren't going home." She laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. "A technicality. Our lawyers will crush it." "You have nothing on us, Cornelius." Blake went crazy. "That is tragic, yes, but it has nothing to do with us. We were victims of a disturbed son. We tried to get him help. That is why we sent Zoe to rehab. We are the good guys here. You are just a thug who got lucky." I stared at her. I marveled at the absolute moral vacuum of her soul. She was ready to bury her son to save her reputation. She was ready to rewrite history while sitting in a cage. "You really don't get it, do you?" I asked quietly. "You think this is about Blake. You think this is about the kidnapping. It is about whatever you framed us for," she spat. I reached into my bag with my good hand. I pulled out a thick red folder. Samuel had compiled it overnight, working with a team of forensic accountants and investigators who owed me favors. It was heavy. It landed on the metal ledge with a solid thud. I opened it and pressed the first page against the glass. "Do you recognize this, Victoria?" I asked. She squinted. It was a bank transfer record. A wire transfer from a construction firm to a shell company registered in her name, dated 15 years ago. "I don't know what that is," she said, dismissing it. "It is a bribe, Victoria," I explained. $50,000 paid to your husband when he was a judge to dismiss a negligence lawsuit against a developer who used substandard concrete. A building collapsed 2 years later. 3 people died. Conrad bought a boat the next week." She paled slightly but kept her chin up. "You cannot prove that." I turned the page. "Here is another one," I said, and another. 20 years of bribes, Victoria. 20 years of selling justice to the highest bidder. Conrad didn't make his money investing. He made it by keeping criminals out of jail and putting innocent people in. We have the ledgers, we have the emails, we have the witness statements from the bagman who delivered the cash. Her hands started to tremble. She clasped them together, trying to hide it. "That is Conrad's business," she whispered. "I knew nothing about it. I am just a wife." I turned to the next section. This one was marked "The Foundation." "And this is your business," I said. "The Foundation for Family Recovery. A beautiful charity. You raised millions over the last decade. But look at the disbursements, Victoria. Look where the money went." I pressed a spreadsheet against the glass. 80% of donations went to administrative costs, I read aloud. Consulting fees paid to companies owned by you. Catering contracts paid to shell companies owned by you. You laundered money through sick people, Victoria. You took money meant for addicts and used it to buy jewelry and remodel your kitchen. That is wire fraud. That is embezzlement. That is tax evasion. And the IRS is very interested in reading this file. Her face went gray. The arrogance began to crack, revealing the terrified old woman beneath. We needed the money, she stammered. The lifestyle. It is expensive. We had to maintain appearances. You do not understand the pressure. I understand greed, I said, closing the folder. And I understand that you are going to federal prison, not for a month, not for a year, for the rest of your life. You are 60 years old, Victoria. With the charges piling up, racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, accessory to murder, you will die in a cell. You will never wear silk again. You will never drink champagne again. You will die alone in a concrete box wearing orange. She stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. No, she screamed, slamming her palms against the glass. You cannot do this. We are the Worthingtons. We are pillars of this community. You are termites, I said, standing up slowly, wincing as my shoulder protested. You ate away at everything good until the whole house collapsed. I looked at her. Tears were streaming down her face now, black streaks of cheap mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at the folder, then she looked at me. She realized there was no way out. She realized her friends in Washington wouldn't touch her now. She realized she was toxic. Cornelius, please, she begged, her voice breaking. Please. I will give you anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just don't give that to the prosecutor. We can make a deal. I picked up the folder. I don't want your money, Victoria, I said. I already have it. I don't want your house. I already own it. There is no deal. This is the bill coming due. I turned my back on her. Cornelius, wait, she shrieked, pounding on the glass. Wait. I am a grandmother. Think of Leo. I stopped. I turned my head slightly. I am thinking of Leo, I said. That is why I am making sure he never sees you again. I walked out of the room. Behind me, I heard her screaming my name. I heard her cursing. I heard her sobbing. It sounded like music. It sounded like justice. I walked down the long gray corridor, past the guards, past the other visitors. My shoulder hurt like hell, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. The empire was dead. The queen was dethroned. Now all that was left was to protect what remained of my family and build something new from the ashes. I walked out into the sunlight, ready for the final act. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old lies. I sat in the front row, directly behind my daughter, my arm still in a sling, the bullet wound, throbbing a dull rhythm against my ribs. The pain kept me focused. It reminded me that this was not a television drama. This was a street fight fought with motions and objections instead of fists and bricks. Blake Worthington sat at the defense table. He looked small. The arrogance that used to radiate off him like heat from a sidewalk was gone, replaced by the twitchy desperation of a junkie going cold turkey in a county lockup. He wore a suit that was 2 sizes too big now that he had lost 20 pounds in detention, but he still had that sneer. The sneer that said he believed his last name was a get-out-of-jail-free card. His lawyer was a man named Preston, a shark, in a $3,000 pinstripe suit, who specialized in getting rich boys out of trouble. Preston was currently pacing in front of the jury box, painting a picture of my daughter that made my hands clench into fists. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston said, his voice smooth as oil, we are here today to determine the fate of a 5-year-old boy. The prosecution wants you to believe that Blake Worthington is a monster. But look at the facts. Who is the one with the documented history of mental instability? Who is the one who was admitted to a rehab facility for severe opioid addiction just 2 weeks ago? Who is the one with no job, no home, and no assets? He pointed a manicured finger at Zoe. It is Zoe Jefferson, he declared. She is a woman on the edge. A woman who hallucinated a hit-and-run accident to cover up her own drug use. A woman who allowed her violent father to kidnap her from a medical facility. Is this really who we want raising a child? Zoe sat in the witness stand. She wore a simple navy dress. Her hair was pulled back. She looked pale, but she sat with a spine of steel. She did not look at Blake. She looked at the jury. She did not cry. She did not flinch at the insults. Pretend you are dead, I had told her in the truck. Pretend they cannot hurt you anymore because they are already ghosts. Pretend I am a ghost, Zoe thought. Your Honor, Preston continued, turning to the judge, we move for full custody to remain with the Worthington estate pending the outcome of the criminal trial. The mother is clearly unfit. She is delusional. She claims her husband is a murderer with zero evidence other than the ravings of a recovering addict. I looked at Samuel Diggs, my lawyer, sitting next to the prosecutor. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time. The prosecutor stood up. "We call Zoe Jefferson to the stand for cross-examination," he said. Zoe stood up. She walked to the microphone. The room went silent. "Ms. Jefferson," the prosecutor asked, "Mr. Preston claims your allegations about the hit and run on Route 9 are hallucinations brought on by drug use. He claims there is no evidence. Is that true?" Zoe looked at Preston. Then she looked at Blake. "No," she said clearly. Her voice did not shake. "Do you have evidence?" the prosecutor asked. "I do," Zoe said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black smartphone. It was not her current phone. It was an old model one she had stopped using years ago. Or so Blake thought. "My father gave me this phone 5 years ago," she told the jury. "He installed a panic app on it. It records audio in the background when triggered. It uploads directly to a cloud server my father controls. I triggered it the night of the gala. I triggered it when Blake started driving too fast." Blake's face went white. He stood up halfway, knocking his chair back. "That is illegal," he shouted. "She cannot use that." "Sit down." Mr. Worthington, the judge, barked, banging his gavel. Zoe tapped the screen. She held the phone up to the microphone. The audio that filled the courtroom was grainy but unmistakable. It was the sound of a high-performance engine roaring. Then Blake's voice slurred and angry. "You are useless, Zoe. You are just like your father. Small." Then a scream, a sickening thud, the sound of glass shattering. "Oh, God, Blake, stop," Zoe's voice on the recording screamed. "You hit her! You hit her!" "Shut up the recording," Blake yelled. Then the sound of the car speeding up, the sound of a phone call being made. "Dad, it is me. I messed up. I hit someone. No, I cannot stop. I am drunk, Dad. You have to help me." The jury was frozen. The stenographer stopped typing. Then came the second clip. This one was quieter. It was the sound of a room with good acoustics. "Listen to me, you stupid girl." This was Victoria Worthington's voice. Cold, imperious. "Blake has a future. You do not. You are going to tell the police you were driving. You are going to say you swerved to avoid a deer. If you do not, we will take Leo. We will bury you, Zoe. We will make you look so crazy no one will ever believe a word you say. Do you understand me? You are a nobody. We own this town." Zoe stopped the playback. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a narrative shattering into a million pieces. Preston, the defense lawyer, looked like he had been slapped. He shuffled his papers, trying to find a technicality, trying to find a way out, but he knew it was over. The jury wasn't looking at Zoe as an addict anymore. They were looking at Blake as a killer. Blake had his head in his hands. He was shaking. He wasn't crying for the girl he killed. He was crying for himself. The prosecutor let the silence hang for a long moment. "No further questions, Your Honor." Zoe stepped down. She walked back to her seat. She passed Blake. He didn't look up. But we weren't done. The criminal case was sealed, but the custody battle and the civil suit for damages were still on the table. Preston wasn't ready to give up completely. He stood up, straightening his jacket, trying to salvage some dignity for his client. "Your Honor," Preston said, his voice strained. "While the recording is disturbing, it does not change the financial reality. Ms. Jefferson has no home. She has no income. She has been living in a hotel paid for by her father. The Worthington estate, despite the current legal troubles, is a stable environment. It is Leo's home. It is a historic property that has been in the family for generations. We argue that Leo should remain in the familiar surroundings of his home under the care of court-appointed guardians until his mother can prove financial independence. He was playing the poverty card. He was betting that the judge would hesitate to give a child to a woman with no assets. I stood up. Samuel tried to grab my arm, but I shook him off. I didn't need a lawyer for this. I needed to be a father. Your Honor, I said, my voice booming in the quiet room, I would like to address the issue of the Worthington estate. The judge looked at me over his glasses. Mr. Jefferson, this is highly irregular. You are not a party to this specific motion. I am the party who holds the deed, Your Honor, I said. Preston laughed. A nervous, incredulous laugh. That is impossible. The Worthington estate is worth $5 million. It is held in a trust. It was held in a trust. I corrected him, walking toward the bench, until the trust defaulted on the mortgage payments 3 months ago. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings last week. I pulled a thick document from my jacket pocket. It was blue-backed and stamped with the county seal. And yesterday morning, I bought the debt, I said. I paid the bank $4.5 million in cash. I foreclosed on the property at 9 a.m. I slapped the deed onto the defense table right in front of Blake. "The house does not belong to the Worthingtons anymore," I said. "It belongs to me." Blake stared at the paper. He read the legal description. He saw my signature on the buyer line. His eyes bulged. You bought my house," he whispered. "I didn't buy your house, Blake," I said, leaning in close. "I bought my daughter's house." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have already executed a quitclaim deed. I have transferred full ownership of the property located at 142 Crestview Drive to Zoe Jefferson. She is not homeless. She owns the mansion this man is sleeping in." I turned to Zoe. She looked shocked. She didn't know I was going to do this. "It is yours, baby," I said. "Every brick, every room, every blade of grass." Zoe stood up. She walked over to the table. She looked at the deed. Then she looked at Blake. For years, this man had made her feel small in that house. He had made her feel like a guest in her own life. He had made her ask permission to change the drapes. He had made her afraid to walk on the expensive rugs. Now she owned the rug he was standing on. Zoe picked up the deed. She looked at Preston. "Get them out," she said. Her voice was cold. It was the voice of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of iron. "Excuse me," Preston stammered. "My in-laws," Zoe said. "Victoria and Conrad, I know they are in jail right now, but their staff is still there, their clothes are still there, their furniture is still there. I want it all gone." She looked at Blake. "And you," she said, "you are evicted, you are trespassing, but that is my home." Blake cried, tears streaming down his face. "I grew up there." "Not anymore," Zoe said. "Now it is Leo's home, and you are not welcome in it." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, since I own the residence where my son has lived his entire life, and since I have no criminal record, and since the father is an admitted murderer, I move for immediate and sole custody of Leo Worthington, and I request a permanent restraining order barring Blake Worthington and his parents from setting foot on my property." The judge looked at the deed. He looked at the shaken defense lawyer. He looked at the broken man at the defense table. He banged his gavel. Motion granted. Sole legal and physical custody is awarded to Zoe Jefferson. The defendant is ordered to vacate the property immediately. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Blake collapsed into his chair, sobbing. He had lost his freedom. He had lost his son. And now he had lost the only thing that gave him any sense of worth, his name and his house. I walked over to Zoe. She wasn't looking at Blake. She was looking at the deed in her hand. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. I put my good arm around her. "Let's go home," I said. "Your home." We walked out of the courtroom. Behind us, the bailiffs were moving in to take Blake back to his cell. He was screaming something about unfairness, something about his rights. No one was listening. Outside, the sun was shining. It was a bright, clear day. The war wasn't over yet. There were still loose ends to tie up. There was still a charity to dismantle and a legacy to erase. But the hardest battle was won. We got into my truck. "Where to?" Dad, Zoe asked. "To the estate," I said, starting the engine. "I want to see you change the locks, and I want to help you throw Victoria's portrait into the dumpster." Zoe smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen on her face in years. "Let's do it," she said. I drove toward the hills. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a contractor or a fighter. I just felt like a dad, and that was enough. 3 days after the trial ended, the real reckoning began. It did not happen in a courtroom with a judge and a stenographer. It happened in the cold concrete reality of the state penitentiary where Blake Worthington was being processed. He thought he was safe. He thought that because he was a Worthington, he would be placed in a minimum security wing with white-collar criminals who played tennis. He was wrong. The moment the guilty verdict was read, his protection evaporated. The cartel lenders he owed $5 million to did not care about appeals or legal motions. They cared about payment. And since Blake could no longer pay with money, he had to pay with flesh. I received the report from a contact inside the corrections department. Blake had been in general population for less than 6 hours when it happened. He was cornered in the shower block. There were no cameras there. 3 men approached him. They did not have shivs. They had fists. They delivered a message from the investors Blake had defrauded. They broke his ribs. They broke his nose. They shattered his orbital socket. When the guards found him, he was curled in a fetal position, sobbing not for his lawyer but for his mother. He was moved to protective custody in the infirmary, but the damage was done. The word was out. Blake Worthington was not a protected prince anymore. He was a target. He would spend the next 20 years looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows, living in a constant state of terror. It was a cruel fate, but it was the fate he had carved for himself when he decided to treat human lives as collateral. While Blake was learning the laws of the prison yard, his parents were learning the laws of survival in the federal detention center. Conrad and Victoria were facing racketeering and fraud charges that carried life sentences. The prosecutor offered a deal. One deal. The first one to cooperate would get a reduced sentence recommendation. The other would die in prison. It took Conrad less than 10 minutes to turn on his wife of 40 years. He sat in the interrogation room, sweating through his orange jumpsuit, and spilled everything. He told the agents that the charity fraud was entirely Victoria's idea. He claimed she forged his signature on the checks. He claimed she was the mastermind behind the money laundering and that he was just a confused old man who did what he was told. He painted her as a Lady Macbeth manipulating him from the shadows. In the next room, Victoria was doing the exact same thing. She told the agents that Conrad was abusive, that he forced her to embezzle the funds to pay for his gambling debts and his mistresses. She handed over ledgers she had kept hidden for years, detailing his bribes and his illegal land deals. She burned him to the ground, hoping to buy a few years of freedom for herself. The Worthington dynasty did not end with a bang. It ended with two terrified old people screaming accusations at each other through cinder block walls, destroying whatever shred of dignity they had left. They had spent a lifetime building an image of a perfect united family. In the end, they were just rats fighting over a sinking ship. While they destroyed each other, I went to work building something new. The bank foreclosure on the Worthington estate was final. The property was mine, or rather it was Zoe's. But we did not want to live there. That house was poisoned. It was filled with the ghosts of their greed and the echoes of their lies. We decided to liquidate everything. I hired an auction house to sell the contents of the mansion. We sold the antique furniture. We sold the art collection. We sold the crystal chandeliers and the silk rugs. We sold the fleet of luxury cars, including the silver sedan Blake had used to kidnap Leo. We stripped the house to its bare bones. It was a cleansing. Every item that left the house took a little bit of the darkness with it. The sale generated $4 million. Combined with the seized assets from the Worthington bank accounts and the liquidation of their shell companies, we had a pool of nearly $10 million. It was blood money. It was money stolen from charities, money obtained through fraud, money stained with the suffering of innocent people. I did not want a penny of it. Zoe did not want a penny of it. We sat in my kitchen drinking coffee, looking at the bank draft. "What do we do with it, Dad?" Zoe asked. "We give it back," I said. "Not to them, to the people they hurt." We established the Zoe Jefferson Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide legal defense, financial aid, and safe housing for women and children escaping domestic abuse and coercive control. We wanted to be the safety net that Zoe didn't have. We wanted to make sure that no woman ever had to stay with a monster because she couldn't afford a lawyer or a rent deposit. We bought a building downtown. It was an old hotel that I had renovated years ago. We turned it into a sanctuary. We hired lawyers who were sharks in court but lambs with their clients. We hired therapists. We hired security. We created a fortress of protection for those who had none. The Worthington name had been synonymous with greed and corruption. We erased it. In its place, we built a legacy of protection and justice. Every dollar they had stolen was now being used to fight men exactly like Blake. It was the ultimate poetic justice. A week after the foundation opened, I made one final stop. I drove to a small medical clinic on the outskirts of the city. It was a modest brick building with a peeling sign. This was the office of Dr. Evans. He was the private doctor I had called the night I rescued Zoe from the rehab center. He was the man who had come to the hotel suite at 2 a.m, who had set up a drip to flush the sedatives from her system, who had monitored her vitals for 3 days without sleep. He had refused payment that night. He had told me he was just doing his duty. He had risked his medical license to treat a patient off the books because he saw a father who was desperate to save his child. He was the antithesis of Dr. Thorne and the corrupt medical system the Worthingtons had exploited. I walked into his waiting room. It was crowded with people who looked tired and worn down. This was a clinic for the working poor, for people without insurance. Dr. Evans was standing at the reception desk reviewing a chart. He looked exhausted. "Dr. Evans," I said. He looked up. A smile touched his tired eyes. "Mr. Jefferson, how is Zoe?" "She is healing," I said. "She is strong." "I am glad to hear that," he said. "What can I do for you?" "You already did it," I said. "You saved her life. You gave us the time we needed to clear her head so she could testify. Without you, none of this would have happened." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. "The foundation we started," I said. "It needs a medical director. Someone who understands that medicine is about healing, not billing. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up to power." I handed him the envelope. Inside was a contract. It offered a salary triple what he was making now and a grant of $2 million to upgrade his clinic and subsidize care for his patients. "We want to partner with you," I said. "We want to send the women and children we help to you. We want to make sure they get the best care regardless of their ability to pay." Dr. Evans opened the envelope. He read the contract. His hands started to shake. He looked at the waiting room full of people he struggled to help every day. He looked at me. There were tears in his eyes. "Cornelius," he said, his voice thick with emotion. This changes everything." "It is just money, Doc," I said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "It is only good if you do something good with it. You helped me when I had nothing but a prayer. Now let me help you." He shook my hand. His grip was firm and honest. "Thank you," he whispered. I walked out of the clinic and into the sunshine. The air felt cleaner. The weight on my chest, the one I had carried since that phone call at 3 a.m., was finally gone. I had dismantled an empire of lies. I had punished the guilty. I had protected the innocent. And I had paid my debts. I got into my truck. I checked the time. It was almost 3 o'clock. Leo would be getting out of his new school soon. A public school where the kids didn't care about last names. I needed to be there. I needed to be a grandfather. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged. The war was over. It was time to live. 1 year later, the view from the 40th floor of the Jefferson Logistics Tower was breathtaking. The city stretched out below a grid of lights and concrete that I had helped build. But I wasn't the one sitting in the CEO's chair. Zoe was. I stood by the window watching her lead the board meeting. She was wearing a tailored cream suit, her hair cut in a sharp professional bob. She did not look like the broken girl I had carried out of that rehab center. She looked like a queen. She was reviewing the quarterly projections for our new affordable housing initiative, pointing out inefficiencies with a laser focus that reminded me so much of her mother. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and authoritative, "we are not cutting corners on the insulation. I do not care what the budget says. We build homes that last. If you cannot make the numbers work, find another supplier. Or I will find another board." The room went silent. Then heads nodded. Pens moved. They respected her. Not because she was my daughter, but because she was formidable. She had taken over the day-to-day operations 6 months ago, and the company had never been stronger. She had taken the pain of the last few years and forged it into armor. Leo was sitting in the corner playing with a toy dump truck on the expensive carpet. He looked up at me and grinned, showing a gap where a baby tooth had fallen out. "Look, Grandpa," he whispered, zooming the truck across the floor. "I am hauling concrete just like you." I smiled. He wasn't afraid of loud noises anymore. He didn't flinch when adults raised their voices. He was a happy, normal 6-year-old boy. The shadow of the Worthington estate had finally lifted from his eyes. Zoe adjourned the meeting. The executives filed out, shaking her hand with genuine deference. She walked over to me and kissed my cheek. "How did I do?" "Dad," she asked, the steel in her voice softening. "You did good, baby," I said. "Better than good. You run this ship better than I ever did." She looked out the window at the city skyline. "I learned from the best," she said. "And Dad, thanks for handling the intake at the foundation this morning. Dr. Evans said we had 3 new families come in for help." "We did," I said. "And we are going to help every single one of them." The Zoe Jefferson Foundation was thriving. It had become a beacon for women trapped in abusive marriages, providing legal aid, housing, and a way out. Every dollar we spent was a direct strike against men like Blake. It was the best investment I had ever made. I looked at my daughter and my grandson. They were safe. They were strong. They were free. The war was truly over. Later that evening, I was back at my modest house in the suburbs. It was quiet. The repairs were finished. The walls were painted. The furniture was new. But the soul of the house was the same. It was a place of peace. I walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The air was crisp, smelling of autumn leaves. I pulled out a stack of bills and circulars, and then I saw it. A plain white envelope. The return address was stamped in red ink. Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury. The name above the address was handwritten in a shaky script. Inmate 89402, Victoria Worthington. I stared at it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt nothing. It was like looking at a relic from a dead civilization. I walked back into the house. I did not open the letter. I knew what it said. It would be a plea, a manipulation, a sob story about how hard prison was, about how she was sick, about how she needed money for the commissary or for a new lawyer. She would try to appeal to my sense of mercy. She would try to use guilt. She would try to use Leo's name. But Victoria Worthington did not understand that she had spent her currency long ago. She was bankrupt in every way that mattered. I walked to the fireplace in the living room. The embers of last night's fire were still glowing faintly under the ash. I struck a match and lit the corner of the envelope. I watched the flame catch. The paper curled and blackened. The red stamp of the prison dissolved into smoke. I held it until the heat licked my fingertips, then I tossed it onto the grate. I watched it burn until it was nothing but gray ash. I didn't owe her a response. I didn't owe her a thought. Her punishment was not just the prison cell. It was the silence. It was the knowledge that the world had moved on without her, that the people she had tried to destroy were thriving while she rotted. That was the true justice. I dusted the ash from my hands and walked to the kitchen. It was time for coffee. I poured a cup of black coffee and walked out to the back porch. I sat in my rocking chair, the wood creaking familiarly under my weight. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn I had tended for 30 years. I took a sip. It was hot and bitter, just the way I liked it. I thought about the journey, the gate, the jail cell, the auction, the warehouse. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the scars were still there. My shoulders still ached when it rained, but they were good scars. They were reminders that I had stood my ground. People looked at me when I went to the grocery store now. Some whispered, some pointed. The man who took down the Worthingtons, the contractor who bought a bank. But most people just saw an old black man in a flannel shirt sitting on his porch drinking coffee, and that was fine by me. I didn't need them to know the extent of my power. I didn't need them to know about the accounts or the properties or the influence. I knew. Zoe knew. And the Worthingtons certainly knew. I had taught them a lesson that I hoped would echo in the halls of their country clubs for generations. Never underestimate a father. Never assume that a man is weak because he is quiet. Never assume that a man is poor because he is humble. And never ever touch his family. I looked at the house next door where a young couple was moving in. They waved at me. I waved back. I was just Cornelius. I was a neighbor. I was a grandfather. But if the devil ever came knocking at my door again, if anyone ever tried to hurt the people I loved, they would find out that the old contractor still had plenty of fight left in him. I took another sip of coffee and watched the stars come out. The world was right. My daughter was a queen. My grandson was a child again. And the monsters were in cages. It was a good night. And tomorrow, I had a garden to tend. Lesson learned. I learned that true power doesn't need to shout. The Worthingtons built their empire on the perception of wealth, but it was hollow. I built mine on concrete loyalty and silence. They mistook my humility for poverty and my patience for weakness. That was their fatal error. Never let anyone define your worth by your zip code or the clothes on your back. Dignity cannot be bought. It must be earned through action. And remember, the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who has nothing to prove to the world but everything to protect for his family. Call to action. Did you enjoy this story of justice? Let me know which city you are listening from in the comments below. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next life story.